Chapter 6:14. Qi Shiwei's hand froze on her abdomen. She sat on the hospital bed looking lifeless. Her eyes were lifeless as well. She was staring at an unknown point. Do you still remember my stepmother? Your stepmother? Isn't she in prison? Yes. She's in prison. Qi Shiwei chuckled. Her voice was extremely sarcastic. She's in prison and she died in prison. Hua Jinyao's eyes widened. If he remembered correctly, Qi Shiwei's stepmother was sentenced to 15 years in prison. I don't know whose retribution this is. Is it mine? It was Lian Jin's. Oh right, his full name was not Lian Jin but Xin Jin. Lian is his mother's surname. She is my stepmother, Xin Mingzhu's younger brother. What? This time even Hua Jinyao was surprised. Are you saying that Lian Jin is your stepmother's younger brother? Are you sure? He said it himself. Qi Shiwei's expression didn't change. She didn't want to recall her stupidity, but in fact she was really stupid. For so many years she had rejected the advances of those men. Firstly, she hadn't met anyone that she liked. Secondly, she always thought that if she had the chance she would still want to find a Chinese man. Just the year before last, Xin Jin appeared in front of her under the alias of Lian Jin. At first, Lian Jin was a marketing director of her partner company. They were both from China and were both struggling in a foreign country. When working together, Qi Shiwei was more patient with Lian Jin than with others. Soon she admired Lian Jin's ability in public affairs. Outside of work, Lian Jin began to contact her in private. She was a very slow person to warm up. Back then Hua Jinyao was so outstanding, but she didn't fall in love with him. Therefore Qi Shiwei even thought that she would never fall in love with another man in her life. After all, there were very few men in the world who were more outstanding and had a better personality than Hua Jinyao. She was wary of others, so Lian Jin patiently expressed his goodwill and approached her again and again. She didn't believe in men, so Lian Jin kept putting down his pride and using his own efforts to move her. Again and again. Qi Shiwei's heart wasn't made of iron. What's more, she was struggling alone in a foreign land. She had also experienced her father's affair and her mother's death. Deep in her bones, she longed for warmth and love. Lian Jin spent nearly a year pursuing her. She was finally moved. On Lian Jin's birthday she agreed to live with him. During the first half of their cohabitation she lived a very happy life. She thought she was the happiest woman in the world. However, the more blissful she felt before, the more painful she felt afterwards. Half a year later, Lian Jin began to leave early and return late. At first she could convince herself that he was busy with work. However, as she continued to discover women's perfume, women's hair, and even other women's lips on his body, she could no longer deceive herself. She quarreled with Lian Jin and argued with him. Lian Jin said that he had made a mistake and asked her to forgive him. In his pleading she forgave him for the first time. But reality told him that if there was a first, there would be a second. If there were two, there would be three. After that, Lian Jin reverted to his old ways, and Qi Shiwei couldn't take it anymore. One day when Lian Jin returned late she told Lian Jin that she wanted to break up. Lian Jin, that pervert, imprisoned her at that time. He threw away all her clothes and left her naked at home. But he still went out every day and came back to deliberately let her see the traces of other women on his body. In the end he even openly brought other women back. He let her watch him make out with other women. Qi Shiwei was almost driven crazy by Lian Jin. That day she held a knife and was about to stab Lian Jin, but she was a woman and couldn't beat Lian Jin in martial arts, so the knife was taken away by him. When Qi Shiwei was about to break up and sue him, Lian Jin told her. If she wanted to break up, she could forget about it. What he wanted to do was to torture her. He wanted to torture her all the time. To make her suffer. Qi Shiwei didn't understand and asked Lian Jin why. Xin Mingzhu, do you still remember? Who are you? Who are you? I'm Xin Jin, Xin Mingzhu's younger brother. Lian Jin and Xin Mingzhu had a good relationship. In the early years the family's conditions were poor, and Xin Mingzhu worked a few jobs to reduce the burden on the family. Later, when she went to work, most of her salary was given to the family. Lian Jin had deep feelings for her. Later, Xin Mingzhu married someone. Although that man was more than 10 years older than Xin Mingzhu, he treated Xin Mingzhu very well. The Xin family had no objections. But the Xin family didn't expect that Xin Mingzhu would be sent to prison after being married for less than 10 years. The Xin family couldn't accept this fact. They appealed, but it was useless. The evidence was conclusive. Xin Mingzhu was sentenced to 15 years. 15 years. When she came out she was already old. Xin Jin was the first to not accept it. But what they didn't expect was yet to come. Not long after Shin Mingzhu went to prison, she actually had a miscarriage. It turned out that she already had a child when she was locked up, but she hadn't gotten pregnant for so many years. In addition, she was distracted by the fact that she was arrested. By the time she found out, the child was already gone. Shin Mingzhu lost her child. A place like prison couldn't have a good environment. Her health deteriorated. Not long after, the prison transferred them to a prison in a neighboring city because of the new protective equipment. Shin Mingzhu, who had changed to a new environment, was bullied. Once, she had a conflict with a cellmate. In the end, because she was too weak, she was seriously injured by the other party. Not long after she was sent to the hospital for emergency treatment, she passed away. That person was naturally sentenced. But all of this was meaningless to Lian Jin. After Shin Mingzhu died, the Shin family's parents were sad every day, especially Mother Shin. Because the knot in her heart couldn't be resolved, she followed after 2 years. On the day Mother Shin passed away, Father Shin couldn't take the blow and ran off to become a monk. To Lian Jin, a good family was torn apart just like that. After his mother passed away and his father became a monk, he was depressed for a long time. Later he understood. All of this was Qi Shiwei's fault. If she hadn't sent Shin Mingzhu to prison, if it hadn't been for Qi Shiwei, how could the Shin family have become like this? Lian Jin thought it through and decided to take revenge. The simplest and most direct revenge was to make Qi Shiwei suffer. He didn't want to kill Qi Shiwei. After all, he didn't want to go to prison. After thinking about it, he finally thought of a way. It was a brilliant way to take revenge. Previously, Qi Shiwei had lost a lot of money because she died in prison. Lian Jin took the money and followed her out of the country. With money, a lot of things would become very simple. Moreover, he was quite lucky. When he was looking for a job, he met his later boss. That boss appreciated his enthusiasm and drive, so he kept helping him. After having the ability, Lian Jin began to investigate Qi Shiwei. Then he got close to her. Perhaps the heavens were helping him. The company that Qi Shiwei worked for actually had a cooperation with their company. The heavens were simply helping him. Everything that happened next was much simpler. Lian Jin approached step by step, Qi Shiwei let down her guard. In the end, Qi Shiwei fell in love with him. When she loved him so much that she couldn't extricate herself, Lian Jin decided to take the last step of revenge. Qi Shiwei didn't expect Lian Jin's true identity to be her stepmother's younger brother. After knowing Lian Jin's identity, she decided not to let him do whatever he wanted. She thought of a way to steal the woman's phone and call the police when Lian Jin brought another woman over again. The police arrived very quickly, but because Lian Jin had evidence to prove that they were husband and wife, the police didn't interfere too much in their affairs. Under Qi Shiwei's constant requests, she was finally able to leave Lian Jin's place. Lian Jin was also warned by the police. They said that even if they were husband and wife, he couldn't lock his wife up. Lian Jin's attitude was very good again, indicating that he would definitely be careful in the future. Qi Shiwei said that she wanted a divorce, and the police didn't interfere in such matters. They thought that it was their own business. Qi Shiwei had no choice but to give Lian Jin the divorce agreement and find a lawyer. She, who thought that Lian Jin wouldn't dare to come again, also returned to the company after being tormented. She started working. In order to stop herself from thinking about that bastard Lian Jin, she devoted all her energy to work. That was how the proposal came about. After she made the proposal, Lian Jin came out. He came to her door and raped her. Qi Shiwei already knew that there was no way to call the police. She and Lian Jin were husband and wife, so Lian Jin could do whatever he wanted. Moreover, with the evidence, it was useless for Qi Shiwei to defend herself, because Lian Jin actually had the photos of her in bed with him. There was also the video plus their relationship as husband and wife. She had no way to get rid of Lian Jin and face Lian Jin's repeated harassment. Qi Shiwei was mentally and physically exhausted. But she didn't expect that she was already pregnant at this time. Moreover, it had already been more than 3 months. In addition, her health was already poor to begin with. The doctor told her that if she chose to abort the child, the end result would be that she might never have a child of her own again. Qi Shiwei, who was in a dilemma and constantly conflicted, finally chose to keep the child. She was now alone. If possible, she wanted to have a child. That way she wouldn't be lonely in the future. That was good too. The child was hers alone. She didn't expect Lian Jin to come looking for her again at that time. Qi Shiwei had no choice but to escape back to the country. Her mother had left her a sum of money, including the villa she was living in now. She chose to stay here to keep the baby. Firstly, she didn't have the energy, and secondly, she thought about how Hua Jinyao had taken care of her before. So she gave the proposal to Hua Jinyao. She thought that she could give birth to the child safely, but she didn't expect Lien Jin to come looking for her again. Her voice was very soft and towards the end, it was almost hoarse. Hu Jinyao didn't expect things to turn out like this. He looked at Qi Shiwei, whose face was pale and who looked like she had lost her soul, and poured her a glass of water. Chapter 6:15. Previously, Hu Jinyao had only thought that Qi Shiwei and Lien Jin had ended up like this because they hadn't parted on good terms regarding the divorce. He didn't expect Lien Jin to be Shin Mingzhu's younger brother. Of course he knew about Shin Mingzhu. Back then Shin Mingzhu had someone tamper with the car. In the end, Qi Shiwei's mother died. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison because of Hu Jinyao. He never thought that one day Shin Mingzhu's family would come to take revenge on Qi Shiwei. What did this have to do with Qi Shiwei? Shin Mingzhu had killed someone and she had to pay with her life. She had to pay the price. How could Lien Jin have the face to make Qi Shiwei pay the price? Even take revenge on Qi Shiwei? He didn't know what Qi Shiwei was thinking now. If she decided to take revenge, Hu Jinyao would definitely help her. It doesn't matter anymore. Qi Shiwei's eyes were empty and she looked very confused. Let him be. The child was gone anyway. She had nothing left, so she didn't care about losing it. But, Jinyao, thank you for helping me so much. But I'll do the rest myself. Qi Shiwei turned to look at Hu Jinyao. Her eyes seemed to be a little different. Hu Jinyao was a little worried. I think he's not letting you go now. You have to think of a way to solve it, right? That's my problem. Shiwei, we're friends. Jinyao, I thank you. But there are some things that I can solve myself. Qi Shiwei's face was full of fatigue. Hu Jinyao wanted to say something else, but he knew that she wouldn't listen anymore. He could only think that if there was a chance he would get someone to keep an eye on her. With him around, he believed that Lien Jin wouldn't act so easily. By the way, Jinyao, there's something I really want your help with. What? I want to see that child. This request stunned Hu Jinyao. Shiwei, you? Qi Shiwei blinked her eyes and looked at him. Her expression was unusually determined and stubborn. No matter what, he's been in my stomach for 7 or 8 months. I want to see him. Hu Jinyao didn't think that was a good idea. Looking at the stubbornness in Qi Shiwei's eyes, he nodded helplessly. I'll go ask for you. In fact, he didn't know where a newborn baby like that would be placed in the hospital. He needed to ask Su Qingsang. Sorry to trouble you. Hu Jinyao glanced at her worriedly. He wasn't sure if she would lose control when she saw the child. He left the ward and instructed Yang Wenchang's men to guard the door and not let Lien Jin in again. He went to the obstetrics and gynecology office by himself. However, before he could reach it, Sun Huiya happened to come out. She was on the phone. When she saw Hu Jinyao, her eyes lit up. She quickly hung up the phone and walked to Hu Jinyao. Director Sun, is Qingsang here? What are you doing? Don't you know? The police took Qingsang away. What did you say? It was Hu Jinyao's turn to be surprised. His expression suddenly changed and he took half a step forward. Tell me clearly, why was Qingsang taken away by the police? It's like this. Sun Huiya told him what had happened in the morning. She was also anxious. How could Qingsang murder that child? We all saw it. When the child was born, it was already not breathing. In fact, Hu Jinyao took too long to send them over. Moreover, it wasn't a matter of delay at all. Even if Hu Jinyao had sent Qi Shiwei to another hospital, the child might not have been able to survive. The lack of oxygen for too long, and the child's body was already weak when it was in the mother's body. When Sun Huiya and Hu Jinyao were in Sea City for disaster relief, she was familiar with Hu Jinyao. Her voice couldn't hide the urgency. Jinyao, you can't not believe in Qingsang's medical ethics, let alone her character. She would never do such a thing. I know, Director Sunday. I know everything. Don't worry, I'll settle this matter. He turned around and left. Hu Jinyao didn't have the time to ask Qi Shiwei to see the child. He took out his phone and started to make a call. His eyes were sharper than ever. Su Qingsang would kill someone? What a joke. Needless to say, it must have been Lien Jin who did it. He must have thought that the child was still alive. In order to force him to hand over the child, he deliberately called the police and had Su Qingsang taken away. After hanging up the phone, Hu Jinyao turned around and was about to go to Qi Shiwei's ward. However, he stopped after taking 2 steps. Lien Jin. He remembered it. After Su Qingsang was interrogated, she was actually denied bail. The reason was that her problem hadn't been solved yet. Hu Jinyao looked at the person in front of him and said in a cold voice, Director Zhao, I want to ask, what crime did my wife commit? When Director Zhao saw Hu Jinyao come straight to his door, he felt sweat on his forehead. How did he know that his subordinates were so unruly? How did they offend this great Buddha in front of them that they couldn't afford to offend? Who didn't know about the Hua family in Rong City? Not to mention the Hua family's status in Rong City. Although the one from the Hua family had retired, his son had now gone up. Not to mention that the granddaughter of the Hua family was married to a commander. He thought of the news he had received that Hua Mingguang's cousin Hua Mingfan was about to be transferred to the province. Director Zhao's back was drenched in sweat. It's a misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Hua Jinyao looked at the time. It's been more than 6 hours since you took my wife away. I want to ask, you said that you invited my wife to assist in the investigation. Since it's to assist in the investigation, it proves that you have no evidence to prove that my wife has committed a crime. Since you have no evidence, what reason do you have to hold my wife captive? President Hua, look, my subordinates are too muddle-headed. I'll take you to release your wife now. It's natural to release my wife. My wife didn't do anything wrong. I'm here to make this clear to you. Yes. We will definitely give you an explanation for this matter. Director Zhao originally wanted to ask someone to bring Hua Jinyao to bring Su Qingsang out, but how could he dare to let someone else bring him out? He directly led the way and brought Hua Jinyao to the place where Su Qingsang was kept. After Su Qingsang arrived, she asked to make a phone call, but no one paid attention to her. Not only did they not let her talk to anyone on the phone, but they also didn't let her leave. However, when she asked them to produce evidence to prove her guilt, these people couldn't produce it. It was fine if they couldn't produce it, but they insisted on blaming her and saying that she had failed in her duty. They said that the cause of the baby's death was because of her. Su Qingsang almost knelt down to these people. These people were really ridiculous. What she didn't know was that the fierce-looking male policeman was Lian Jin's classmate. Lian Jin found him and told him to teach Su Qingsang a lesson. Since she couldn't get out, Su Qingsang wasn't in a hurry to get out. She began to wonder who was trying to make things difficult for her. Hua Yifan and Su Peijian were both in prison. The second trial had ended, and both of them upheld the original verdict. She also wanted to go over and see Xiang Kaiping, but she didn't know how to face Xiang Kaiping several times. In the end, she could only give up. Xiang Kaiping needed time and so did she. Therefore, from the second trial of Su Peijian and Hua Yifan's case until now, Su Qingsang hadn't seen Xiang Kaiping even once. Could it be Xiang Caiping's doing? Su Qingsang immediately rejected this idea. Based on her understanding of Xiang Kaiping, it was unlikely that she would do such a thing. Then who was it? Qishiwei? Su Qingsang immediately shook her head. She had lost her child and it was indeed a sad time. But if Qishiwei was that kind of person, Hua Jinyao wouldn't have become good friends with her. Or had she misjudged him? Su Qingsang's mind was running wild. She thought of many possibilities but she rejected them one by one. The male police officer had come twice in the middle, and both times he had asked her to confess. Su Qingsang was speechless. She had always had high respect for the police and the military. Especially since Zhang Yichen saved her last time, she had regarded such people as heroes of the people. But what was going on now? The other party had no evidence, but he was just insisting that she confess? She was still wondering why the police officer was biting her like this and not letting her go when the door of the little dark room opened. She thought that the police officer was here to make her confess again, so she sat there without moving. She didn't expect that it wasn't the police officer who came this time, but Hua Jinyao. Beside him was a middle-aged man, also wearing a uniform. Su Qingsang glanced at him. Before she could say anything, Hua Jinyao had already walked up to her in 3 steps. He reached out and pulled her up into his arms. There were people beside them, and Hua Jinyao's enthusiastic behavior made Su Qingsang a little embarrassed. More than that, she felt relieved and she trusted Hua Jinyao. It was great that he was here. She knew that he would definitely come to take her out, but she didn't expect him to be so fast. She had thought that she would have to stay here for a whole day just like how it was shown on TV for 24 hours before she could leave. I'm sorry I'm late. He didn't notice that Su Qingsang had been taken away by the police immediately, and let her suffer here for so many hours. Thinking of this, Hua Jinyao felt very guilty. He let go of his hands and stepped back a little. He put his hands on Su Qingsang's shoulders and looked up and down. How are you? Are you okay? Su Qingsang shook her head. After all, times had changed. Even if they wanted to make things difficult for her, they couldn't really do anything to her. Hua Jinyao breathed a sigh of relief. As soon as he turned around, he saw a man and a woman standing behind Director Zhao. The two of them looked at Hua Jinyao and seemed to be a little surprised. The male police officer's expression was even better. Just as he was about to say something, Director Zhao turned around and scolded the two men. What are you doing? Is Mrs. Hua someone you can touch? You two idiots. Do you have any brains? The two of them didn't dare to say a word after being scolded by Director Zhao. Director Zhao scolded them a few more times. When he turned around to look at Hu Jinyao, his voice softened. President Hua, look, we didn't know about this either. We didn't do it on purpose. Then look, he couldn't be blamed for being too careful. One had to know that if Hua Mingfan of the Hua family was transferred to the province, it would be a piece of cake for him to deal with a small bureau chief like him. Moreover, the Hua family was a big business, and it was a key enterprise supported by the province. He really didn't want to have a head-on conflict with the other party. Hua Jinyao was only concerned about Su Qingsang now. He didn't have the mood to care about Director Zhao's official career. However, his gaze swept across the two people behind Director Zhao and he snorted coldly. Since you don't know how to handle cases, don't stay in such an important position. Give it to someone who is capable. Yes. Definitely. I will definitely do as you say. Director Zhao repeatedly agreed. The two policemen's faces turned pale. Especially the male policeman who was Lian Jin's classmate. He had worked for a long time before he was promoted to the position of deputy captain. Seeing that he could be promoted to captain at the end of the year, he thought that he could be promoted faster after this matter was over. Who knew that this would turn out to be like this? Hua Jinyao didn't care if they were happy or not. He didn't have the time to pay attention to Director Zhao's words. He took Su Qingsang and left. Yang Wenchang had already parked the car outside. When he saw the two of them coming out, he quickly went forward to open the door for them. After getting into the car, Su Qingsang looked at the gate outside. Director Zhao was still standing there waving at them. How did you know that I was locked up? I thought you wouldn't know until tomorrow. I went to the hospital to look for you. Director Sun told me. Hua Jinyao held her hand tightly as he spoke. Why didn't you call me immediately? Don't mention it. Su Qingsang was depressed when she mentioned this. My phone was taken away by them. They didn't let me make any calls or contact the outside world at all. It's my fault. Hua Jinyao felt a little guilty. He had heard from Director Sun that she had been trying to contact him, but she hadn't been able to. Next time I'll definitely save a copy of my phone number for your colleagues. Tell them to call me if they need anything. How can I blame you? Su Qingsang held his hand with an extremely indifferent expression. I can't blame you either. Even if you knew, I would still have been brought here. It's just a matter of how long I stay. I know. However, he still couldn't help but blame himself and feel guilty for not protecting her well. By the way, do you know who wants to deal with me? Su Qingsang believed that since he was here, he must have already found out. Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes, and there was a flash of malice in them. I have a rough idea. Who? Lian Jin. Lian Jin? Who's that? Su Qingsang didn't remember this name. Qi Shiwei's husband. Ha! This time, it was Su Qingsang's turn to be surprised. She looked at Hua Jinyao. He wants to deal with me because his son died? Yes. But that child of his was actually not breathing when he was born. How can he blame me? As Su Qingsang said this, she suddenly turned her head to look at Hua Jinyao. Her clear eyes were filled with a hint of inquiry. Don't tell me that your good classmate is also involved in this matter? No. Are you sure? To be honest, Su Qingsang was indeed a little unhappy. After all, no woman would like her husband to take care of another woman. That was her personality. That was the kind of person she was. If she was unhappy, she would clearly express her unhappiness. Hua Jinyao squeezed her hand and shook his head gently at her. She really doesn't know. In fact, she and her husband are about to divorce. Hua Jinyao had no intention of gossiping about other people's privacy. But Su Qingsang wasn't an outsider after all. He briefly told her about Qi Shiwei's situation. After hearing it, Su Qingsang's eyes widened. So melodramatic? This was simply a real-life version of Hamlet. Yes. Hua Jinyao thought of Qi Shiwei's pale face and how exhausted she looked after being tormented. He let out a long sigh. That's what happened. Lian Jin didn't believe that the child was no longer around. He thought that I deliberately hid him so that he wouldn't find him. Then he found out about my relationship with you, and that's why he did what he did today. I think he wanted to make me compromise by making things difficult for you. There was nothing Su Qingsang didn't understand when she was there. However, did he still come to look for Qi Shiwei today? Yes. But my men have already thrown him out. Hua Jinyao thought of Lian Jin and felt a little ashamed. Yes. His family was miserable and he was indeed pitiful. But what did these things have to do with Qi Shiwei? Qi Shiwei's mother had been killed and her father had been kidnapped. She didn't think of revenge but fled abroad. If she hadn't found out that her biological mother had been killed by her stepmother, her mother might still be dead with a grievance. Under such circumstances, he didn't think that Qi Shiwei had done anything wrong. It was hateful that Lian Jin, a man, actually made things difficult for a woman. Throw him out? Su Qingsang was silent and thought of something. She looked at Hu Jinyao very seriously. I don't think it's a good idea for you to throw him out. Since he wants to see that child so much, let him see him. Qingsang? The child is still in the hospital morgue. We have no right to dispose of him. In fact, what to do with the child's body still depends on what Qi Shiwei and her husband think. At this point, Su Qingsang let out a long sigh. I've been in the hospital for several years. In fact, I've seen many things like this. No matter what, the people who left have already left. But the living still have to continue living. If possible, I hope they can all think it through. Hu Jinyao gave her a deep look. He suddenly leaned over and kissed Su Qingsang on the lips. Wife, I realize that you actually have the talent to be a philosopher. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh as she glanced at him. I can't be a philosopher. I've just seen too much birth, aging, illness, and death. I'm just more open-minded than the average person. Hu Jinyao didn't respond. He thought of how Su Qingsang had forgiven Su Qinghui time and time again for the harm he had caused her. It might have something to do with her profession. After all, compared to life and death, everything else was really a trivial matter. Shiwei also wants to see that child. Why don't you arrange it? Okay. Su Qingsang didn't stay for long. It was still early, so she returned to the hospital first. Qi Shiwei had only seen Su Qingsang once at the Hua family's banquet. Now that she was looking at Su Qingsang in a white coat, she looked completely different from the dazzling beauty at the banquet, but she still couldn't hide her amazement. Su Qingsang, who was wearing a uniform, had an extra charm. Dr. Su, I've caused you trouble. Qi Shiwei calmed down and already knew her situation. Especially after Su Qingsang was taken away by the police, Director Sun thought about it and felt that it might have something to do with Qi Shiwei, so he came to the ward and explained what happened that day. It was also because of this that Qi Shiwei found out that Su Qingsang had been brought to the police station because of her. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. He only wants to be happy and doesn't care about other people's lives. I've implicated you. Her voice was very hoarse and it sounded powerless. She also looked as if she would fall at the slightest gust of wind. Su Qingsang had seen many patients, but there were very few who could recover as quickly as Qi Shiwei and accept reality so easily. Miss Qi, you don't have to say sorry. This has nothing to do with you. If you want to see that child, I'll take you to see him. But if it's possible, let the child's father see him. When the time comes, you can speak clearly if you have anything to say. Qi Shiwei looked at Su Qingsang deeply. When her gaze fell on Hu Jinyao, who was beside her, Hu Jinyao nodded slightly. His meaning was the same as Su Qingsang's. She smiled bitterly, her face full of sarcasm. All right. If he wants to see him, let him see him. As she spoke, she picked up her phone from the bedside and pressed a string of numbers that she was already familiar with, but had once blocked. Very soon Lian Jin arrived. He didn't expect Qi Shiwei to take the initiative to see him. This was truly a rare occurrence. When he saw Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao, he sneered. What? Did you call me over to settle the score with me? Su Qingsang looked at the man in front of her. He was not bad looking. He was tall and thin and his facial features could be considered handsome. However, when he spoke, he looked at them with disdain, which made his face look a little more cynical, making people feel a little uncomfortable. Settle the score? Of course I have to settle the score with you. Qi Shiwei glared at the man in front of her. Now just looking at this man made her feel disgusted, nauseous and uncomfortable. Lian Jin, didn't you say you wanted to see that child? I'll take you to see him now. As Qi Shiwei spoke, she forced herself to get out of bed. She still had wounds on her body and she had just given birth. Her body was very weak, so how could Su Qingsang dare to let her walk so far? She asked the nurse outside to bring a wheelchair, and she went forward to help Qi Shiwei sit on it. I'll push you there. Qi Shiwei was about to refuse, but when she saw the worry in Su Qingsang's eyes, she agreed. Soon, a group of people arrived at the morgue from the obstetrics and gynecology department of the hospital. Even during the day, the morgue gave off a gloomy feeling. Su Qingsang greeted her colleague in charge of the morgue. She pushed Qi Shiwei into the place where the bodies were kept. She had personally sent the child over, so she knew where to put it. She opened the drawer and gestured for Qi Shiwei and Lian Jin to come over. Lian Jin had always thought that his child was still alive, but he didn't expect Su Qingsang to really bring them to the morgue. Chapter 616. Hu Jingyao was still holding a grudge against Lian Jin for causing Su Qingsang to go to the police station. Seeing that he was standing at the door of the morgue without moving or going in, he snorted coldly. What? You don't dare to go in? Lian Jin stood there without moving. He looked at Hu Jingyao. His footsteps were heavy and his heart was beating fast. Su Qingsang glanced at him, then firmly pushed Qi Shiwei inside. In fact, if possible, she didn't want to make this trip, nor did she want Qi Shiwei to see it. It really wasn't a good experience. She pushed the wheelchair in front of the poor baby. The child was placed in the big drawer of the morgue. After it was pulled out, it was covered with a black cloth. Su Qingsang glanced at Qi Shiwei, not sure if she was ready. Qi Shiwei didn't seem to notice her worried gaze. She just stared at the black cloth. Su Qingsang bit her lip and finally helped open the zipper. The child is here. Qi Shiwei only took one look and was stunned. She looked up at Su Qingsang and her voice was slightly trembling. That's him? Yes. Su Qingsang couldn't bear to look at the child who was no longer breathing. She looked at Qi Shiwei. This is the morgue after all. Don't stay too long. Especially since you've just given birth. It's not good for your health to stay here for too long. Qi Shiwei didn't say anything. She just stared at the child. Su Qingsang couldn't bear to look at her anymore because of her expression. I'll pick you up later. After saying that, she took a deep look at Qi Shiwei and turned to leave. When she passed by Lian Jin, her voice was very low. This child is the child I delivered. If you don't believe me, you can go for a DNA test. Walking out, she looked at Hu Jingyao. Hu Jingyao nodded slightly at her, and then the two of them looked at Lian Jin. Hu Jingyao was still a little worried about Qi Shiwei. However, he knew that at a time like this, she wouldn't want him to be here to participate in her affairs. He more or less knew Qi Shiwei's personality. After glancing at Su Qingsang, the two of them left hand in hand. Although Qi Shiwei was already mentally prepared, when she really saw the black and stiff baby, her body couldn't help but start to tremble. This was her child. The child who had accompanied her and stayed in her stomach for 8 months. He died the moment he was born. He didn't even have the chance to see the world. The reason why the child's body turned blue was because of the lack of oxygen. Just as Sun Huiya had said, he had been in his stomach for too long, causing him to have difficulty breathing and eventually suffocating. Why did she argue with Lian Jin? Why didn't she come to the hospital earlier to protect the fetus? Why didn't she ask Hu Jingyao for help from the beginning? That way her child might not have died. Of course, Lian Jin was responsible for this, but it was more of her responsibility. This realization made her suddenly lower her head, cover her face and cry. Lian Jin had walked to her side at some point in time. He also saw the child. Even though he was a man, when he saw the child's pitiful state, he couldn't help but tremble. He couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Especially when he heard Qi Shiwei's suppressed, painful cries. He felt more and more uncomfortable. After a long time, Qi Shiwei finally calmed down. She reached out her hand, unafraid of the child's blue face and already cold body. She reached out her hand and gently caressed the child's face. In order to come back this time, she didn't tell anyone many things. She only wanted to escape, but she was wrong. Now she didn't want to be wrong anymore. Lian Jin. She knew that Lian Jin was an alias and that his real name was Shinjin, but Qi Shiwei was already used to calling him that. Let's get a divorce. Lian Jin's brows were tightly furrowed. He stood there, his gaze landing on the child, but he didn't speak. Qi Shiwei didn't need him to say anything. She just wanted to say her decision. You want the child, but the child is gone. He's right here. If you still have a trace of humanity, don't disturb his path to reincarnation. What do you mean? Nothing. This child is mine. I'll bury him properly and I'll find a mage to help him transcend. But all of this has nothing to do with you. Qi Shiwei, don't get me wrong. I also have a share of this child. You have a share? Qi Shiwei seemed to have heard a joke. She suddenly turned to look at Lian Jin with hatred in her eyes. Do you know how hard it was for me to keep this child alive? Do you know why it was so hard? It had been a long time since Lian Jin had seen Qi Shiwei look so resentful. He felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. You didn't stay in the United States and ran back to China. Of course it was hard for you to fly all the way here. Lian Jin, I hate how shameless you are. Qi Shiwei sneered. Do you still remember the day before I ran away? Qi Shiwei didn't mind clarifying. You locked me up, I ran away and then you came looking for me. Do you remember what good thing you did? Lian Jin's expression finally began to change. Qi Shiwei turned her wheelchair to face Lian Jin. You raped me and you raped me. You remember, don't you? Her voice trembled with anger. Because of what you did, I've been bleeding ever since. The doctor told me that I have a tendency to have a threatened abortion. Lian Jin, did you hear me clearly? All of this was your fault. It was you. Her uterus had already been injured, but it was treated so roughly by Lian Jin. This caused the fetus to be unstable during her pregnancy. She even had reason to suspect that even if she really gave birth to the child safely, the child's body would be very weak and fragile. After all, she had almost miscarried a few times and almost lost the child. All of this was Lian Jin's fault. How could he have the face to blame others now? Lian Jin stood there. His lowered face made it hard to see his expression for a moment. However, his hands, which were hanging by his side, were tightly clenched into fists. Qi Shiwei. She could have said it at the time. She could have told him that she was pregnant. But Lian Jin knew that in that situation, what was the use of saying it? Qi Shiwei looked at him and sneered. Lian Jin, now that the child is dead, you still have the face to tell me that this is your child? Lian Jin's face was a little pale. His gaze fell on the stiff and blue baby. He suddenly turned his face away, not daring to face her. Everything was irreversible. Inexplicably, things had come to this. Qi Shiwei looked at him coldly, feeling very disdainful of his evasive gaze. Her voice also became sharp and cold. Now leave this place. Whether it's me or my son, we don't want to see you, the murderer. After saying this, she no longer looked at Lian Jin but continued to look at the baby. There was no longer any meaning in pursuing anyone's responsibility. Even if she pushed all the blame on Lian Jin, what was the use? Her child was already dead and couldn't come back. The temperature in the morgue was already lower than outside. Qi Shiwei had been staying here all this time, so it was inevitable that she would suffer from the cold. In addition, she was in a bad mood, so Su Qingsang was a little worried. In the end, Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao calculated the time. Su Qingsang came in and pushed her out again. When she went in, Lian Jin had already left. Qi Shiwei, on the other hand, had been staring at the child. Her expression was a little wooden, and her eyes were also red. The moment her body returned to the hospital bed, Qi Shiwei seemed to have finally recovered from her sadness. Dr. Su, thank you. You're welcome. These are all things I should do. Qi Shiwei's voice was a little hoarse. Although she hadn't cried for long just now, she had just given birth and had spent so much effort to scold Lian Jin. Her throat was very uncomfortable now. Seeing this, Su Qingsang quickly poured her a glass of water and asked her to drink it. After drinking the water, Qi Shiwei felt much better. She looked at Su Qingsang gratefully, then at Hua Jinyao, who had been standing by the side. Dr. Su, you're such a nice person. It's Jinyao's blessing to be able to marry you. The corners of Hua Jinyao's lips curled up slightly. He was obviously very happy with Qi Shiwei's praise. I also feel very lucky to be able to marry him. Su Qingsang's words made Qi Shiwei nod. Yes, they were all very lucky, unlike her, who had been unlucky from the beginning to the end. Seeing the change in her expression, Su Qingsang could tell that she must be feeling bad. After thinking about it, she tried her best to comfort her. Miss Qi, I know you're very sad and it's hard for you to accept losing that child. But no matter what, people still have to look forward. You're so beautiful and so young. I believe that as long as you're willing to walk out of it, you'll definitely have a bright future. Seeing that Qi Shiwei's expression didn't change and was still sad, Su Qingsang felt a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, I didn't have the right to say so much. But I really think it's better for you to let it go. What's more, you said that the child has been relying on you for several months. I don't think you want him to feel uneasy when he leaves, right? It was impossible for Qi Shiwei to get over it so quickly. Even her sadness couldn't disappear immediately. However, Su Qingsang's words made her feel a little better. Thank you, Dr. Su. You're a good person. As she spoke, she looked at Hua Jinyao again. You're all good people. You're Jinyao's friend. If you don't mind, you can call me Qingsang from now on. Okay, then don't call me Miss Qi. Call me Shiwei. Su Qingsang and Qi Shiwei looked at each other and smiled. Now they had some admiration for each other. Qi Shiwei didn't say much before she started to feel tired. Su Qingsang knew that she was also tired. The ups and downs in her emotions weren't good for her current body. She told her to rest well and not worry about anything. She then gave some instructions as a doctor. She didn't say that Qi Shiwei couldn't have any more children. At this stage, if Qi Shiwei found out, the blow would be even greater. She then instructed Xiao Jiang to take good care of Qi Shiwei before she left with Hua Jinyao. By then, the sky had already darkened. Hua Jinyao held Su Qingsang's hand and walked in the direction of their car. Qingsang, thank you for today. He thanked her for letting Qi Shiwei see the baby and for comforting her. There were some things that a man like him couldn't say, but Su Qingsang's perspective was different. Thank me? Su Qingsang shook her head. There's no need to thank me. I'm a doctor. No matter who comes and who encounters such a thing, I will treat them equally. No matter what, thank you. Hua Jinyao could also tell that it would be difficult for Qi Shiwei to get over it in a short period of time. Moreover, there was a guy like Lian Jin. But no matter what, he could at least tell that Qi Shiwei didn't have any negative thoughts. That was enough. As for the rest, he could only leave it to the heavens and let the heavens decide. Yang Wenchang had been waiting outside for a long time, so he wasn't impatient. The two of them got into the car and the car drove out of the hospital smoothly. Su Qingsang looked at the street outside. The sky was getting darker and the sky was getting darker just like her current mood. No matter what, the departure of a life had more or less affected her. In fact, she really felt bad for Qi Shiwei. Don't think about it. This isn't your responsibility. Hua Jinyao saw that Su Qingsang was in a daze just now. He reached out and rubbed her head. His voice was very soft. You didn't want this to happen either. It's not your fault. I know. Su Qingsang rubbed the space between her eyebrows. She had been on duty for the whole night. She had been locked up for another half a day. This time she was really sleepy. I just feel a little regretful. She felt a little regretful and a little sad. Every time she couldn't save a life, she would feel this way. Do you know? Our hospital, including the Lin City Hospital where we stayed before, is considered good. After all, sometimes we need to prove some surgeries. But some hospitals are actually very excessive. She had a classmate who was assigned to a local hospital after graduation. That classmate had said a lot of such things in her classmates' group chat. After some women got pregnant because the man's family wanted a boy, they would go through an ultrasound to verify their gender in advance. Even if they were very strict, there were still some people who would take advantage of loopholes. After those people found out that they were pregnant with a girl, they would abort. The most exaggerated woman actually aborted 4 daughters in a row in order to give birth to a son. When Su Qingsang's classmate mentioned this, they were all very puzzled. She had also asked the other party if that was the case, why did they still perform the surgery on that woman? Su Qingsang's classmate told her that if she was the one doing it, at least her skills were not bad, and the hospital's equipment and specifications were also up to standard. If they didn't do it for the other party and the other party went to a small hospital, not to mention that the technology might not be mature, even the facilities and equipment were not comparable to a big hospital. More importantly, if something were to happen to him, it would be terrible. Rather than letting these pregnant women go to other places to torment their health and even cause them to die, it would be better to do it on their own hands. Su Qingsang's hair stood on end when she heard that. She could only be glad that because of her excellent grades when she graduated, she had been recruited by Zhang Qiubai to the first hospital of Lin City, which was much stricter. Even so, Su Qingsang had seen a lot of similar incidents. There was once a pregnant woman whose fetal movements were not obvious when she was pregnant. But there were still fetal movements. The pregnant woman did not find any problems after several examinations, and then stopped coming for examinations for 3 months. Who knew that when the child was about to be born, she would find that the child was already dead? Su Qingsang had seen such things many times. But every time she saw it, she still felt uncomfortable. I must work harder to study in the future to improve my medical skills. I hope I can help more people. Su Qingsang's voice was faint, but it was filled with determination. Hua Jinyao reached out and held her hand. His eyes were deep and there was a calming power in them. I believe in you. His Qingsang would definitely become the most outstanding and first-class obstetrician. Su Qingsang smiled because of his affirmation. She looked at Yang Wenchang who was driving seriously in the front. Some things could wait until they got back. When she got home, Su Qingsang was tired and hungry. She lay down and fell asleep almost immediately after she ate and took a shower. She had something to say to Hua Jinyao but she couldn't. She was really too tired and sleepy. When Hua Jinyao came out of the bathroom after taking a shower, he saw the sleeping beauty in front of him. Su Qingsang was sleeping soundly on the bed. Her cheeks were flushed with 2 beautiful red clouds. Her steady breathing showed that she was sleeping soundly. The slight frown on her face in her sleep made Hua Jinyao frown as well. Sitting down by the bed, he reached out and gently stroked Su Qingsang's eyebrows. She was sleeping soundly and didn't wake up because of his action, but her eyebrows slowly smoothed out because of his action. The corners of Hua Jinyao's lips curled up. He leaned down and gently kissed Su Qingsang's forehead. Su Qingsang fell into a deep sleep. She didn't wake up until almost 9 o'clock the next morning. Because she didn't have to go to work, she wasn't in a hurry to get up. She looked around and saw that the bed next to her was already cold. It seemed that Hu Jinyao had been up for a long time. When Su Qingsang tidied herself up and walked out of the living room, she was surprised to see that Hu Jinyao was still there. "You're up? Breakfast is in the kitchen. You can eat it after you heat it up." Hu Jinyao's gaze moved away from the screen in front of him. "Or should I heat it up for you?" "No need, I'll do it myself." Su Qingsang walked towards the kitchen. There was indeed breakfast prepared by Hu Jinyao. After breakfast she called Ling Fei. She was on duty today. She asked Ling Fei to keep an eye on Qi Shiwei. Although she knew that Qi Shiwei wouldn't do anything extreme, she wasn't in a good state right now. "Don't you have to work today?" Hu Jinyao reached out his hand to her, and Su Qingsang sat down beside him. "It's Saturday." "Saturday?" Su Qingsang had experienced so many things yesterday that she had forgotten that it was Saturday. "Hasn't your company been busy recently?" Ever since Hu Yifan went to prison, it had affected the Hu family a little. The first was Hu Mingliang. He couldn't let go of the anger in his heart. After Hu Yifan went to prison, he didn't want to go to work. He was the department manager of Tianyu Group. If he didn't go to work, he had to find someone to replace him. It was easy to find someone, but the key was that Hu Mingliang said that he was only on annual leave. It wouldn't be a problem for Hu Jinyao to temporarily replace him. The problem was that a person like Hu Yifan had appeared. Even a large company like the Hu family was still at the center of gossip. Many people were discussing such a matter. A few people from their partner companies were supposed to sign the contract, but now they said that it would be delayed for a few days. The reason was that since Hu Yifan could steal their company's plan, it was inevitable that he could do it elsewhere. Hu Jinyao had expected these things and had also taken measures to deal with them. Therefore, other than the few days when Hu Yifan went to prison, he was so busy that he couldn't even touch the ground. The rest of the time was fine. The company's matters are endless. However, it's also important to accompany your wife. Hu Jinyao's voice was very soft and gentle. Su Qingsang moved away from his embrace and looked at his face with a hint of playfulness. "Is it more important to accompany your wife or your ex-girlfriend?" "Qingsang?" This situation wasn't right. He saw that Su Qingsang was fine just now. No, she was still fine yesterday. She was very concerned about Qi Shiwei. Why did his attitude change after a night's sleep? Su Qingsang sat up straight and gently tapped Hu Jinyao's chest with one hand. "Did I say something wrong? Am I wrong?" She tilted her face. Her face was red because she had just woken up. Her watery eyes were a little teasing because of the joke just now, which inexplicably added a sense of charm. No, she was pregnant and she got divorced. It's not easy for her to be here alone. Most importantly, she had also helped him. Hu Yifan's incident this time, and why he could send Su Peijian to prison so easily. It was all Qi Shiwei's credit. Even if she hadn't saved his life before, Hu Jinyao would have taken good care of her. It's indeed not easy for her to have a big belly, so our great President Hu visits from time to time and takes good care of her. He hugs and hugs her, seriously. When she saw the care at the police station yesterday, even though she knew that the other party was using this to break down her psychological defense, she still felt a little uncomfortable. After all, no woman would like to see her husband show so much care for another woman. Not to mention Hu Jinyao's concern for Qi Shiwei was beyond normal. "Qingsang." Hu Jinyao reached out to grab her hand. Su Qingsang dodged to the side and dodged. She tapped Hu Jinyao's chest again. "It's fine if you hugged and hugged, but someone even took a lot of photos and showed them to me. Mr. Hua, I want to interview you. How does it feel to meet your first love again after so many years?" "Wife. Didn't I tell you before that she was just a classmate?" "Just a classmate?" Su Qingsang nodded. "She's just a classmate, yet you hugged and hugged her. You sent her to the hospital and spent the night with her. By the way, why did you go to the hospital to look for me? Don't tell me that you missed me. You should be worried about your good classmate, right?" "Qingsang." Hu Jinyao wanted to explain, but Su Qingsang didn't give him a chance. She gently placed her fingers on his lips and spoke very softly. Chapter 617. Qingsang. How about today? Su Qingsang nodded as she spoke, her expression quite serious. How about today? It's rare that we're both free. The more she said, the more outrageous she sounded. Hu Jinyao pulled Su Qingsang's hand away, and while she was still talking, he turned over and pressed her under his body. Wu Jinyao. How could Su Qingsang be a match for him? In an instant she was pinned under his body. The sofa was very spacious. Su Qingsang was lying on her back and there was still a lot of space. Are you excited? Hu Jinyao squinted at her. There was a hidden danger in his eyes. Why am I the one who's excited? Aren't I fulfilling your wish? Su Qingsang put a hand on his chest and looked at his face. Shouldn't you be grateful to me? Su Qingsang wasn't going to work, nor did she plan to go out. She was wearing a set of home clothes. Because of the action of lying down, her snow-white collarbone was exposed to the air. Hu Jinyao's Adam's apple moved up and down a few times. Thank you? Aha. Su Qingsang didn't realize the danger and nodded. Yes, I should be grateful to you. As he spoke, he lowered his head and kissed Su Qingsang's lips. Her eyes widened as she stared at his enlarged face. Woo, you broke the rules. Hu Jinyao had a faint smile on his face, but his big hands were moving unceremoniously on Su Qingsang's body. Su Qingsang's breathing quickened. She hadn't finished settling the score with him yet. This person was really... Finally, Hu Jinyao slightly moved away from her. She gritted her teeth. Hu Jinyao, you broke the rules. I'm thanking you. As Hu Jinyao spoke, his hand had already reached under the hem of her dress. Thank you with your body. You! Su Qingsang's voice was blocked by him again. She couldn't say the rest of her sentence. The following content has been censored for 5,000 words. For those in need, please follow the instructions at the bottom of this article. Su Qingsang lay on the bed, motionless. The living room was in chaos. She wanted to get up and clean up, but she didn't have any strength left in her. Looking at the time, it had been almost 2 hours since she finished eating in the morning. She then looked at Hu Jinyao. He looked refreshed, as if he hadn't been affected by the strenuous exercise. She gritted her teeth, feeling that it was extremely unfair. Speaking of which, he was the one who put in more effort, but why was he the one who was more tired? She turned over, but felt that such a simple movement made her waist ache. She couldn't help but glare at Hu Jinyao. He had already come out of the bathroom. His hair was slightly damp and he was full of energy. He didn't seem to be affected at all. Tired? Hu Jinyao sat down by the bed. Su Qingsang rolled her eyes and ignored him. Seeing that he was about to kiss her again, she quickly put her hands in front of his chest. Don't come. She would definitely die in his hands if he tried again. Hu Jinyao kissed her on the lips. All right. Rest for a while. I'll have someone send lunch over. Auntie, you didn't come over to cook at noon. They usually didn't come over on Saturdays. After all, they went to the Hua family's old mansion most of the time. Su Qingsang blinked as if she had thought of something. She immediately remembered. However, her waist ached and she fell back. Wu Jinyao held her body. Honey, what are you doing? The sofa outside is so messy. Don't you want to clean it up? Su Qingsang was anxious. If someone came over later and saw it, it would be really embarrassing. Wu Jinyao was stunned for a moment. Messy? Su Qingsang poked his chest, and there was a hint of anger on her face. Go clean it up. Honey, just ask Auntie Yu to do it. No way. She didn't want Auntie Yu to know that they were messing around in the living room outside. It would be so embarrassing. Are you going or not? I'll go if you don't. Do you still have strength? It wasn't that he looked down on her, but she looked like she was half dead. How could she have the strength to clean it up? Wu Jinyao. Su Qingsang was furious. Who caused her to have no strength? She hadn't finished settling the score with him just now. Who caused me to have no strength? Hu Jinyao looked a little embarrassed and didn't say anything. Su Qingsang poked him in the chest. Who made me like this? Who ignored her begging and wanted to do it again? Once wasn't enough? Why did he have to do it again? He could do it again, but he had to do it in such an unbelievable position. How could she not be tired? Was me. You still know it was you? Su Qingsang grabbed his hand and twisted it hard, but found that she couldn't twist it. Instead, her hand hurt, so she had to withdraw her hand. Aren't you thinking about that ex-girlfriend of yours? You can go torment her. Hu Jinyao twitched his nose and moved closer to Su Qingsang. There was a hint of teasing in his eyes. Do you smell a strong sour smell? No. No. Hu Jinyao moved closer to her face again. I smell it. It's so sour. This room is going to be flooded with vinegar. Is that so? Su Qingsang pushed his face to the side. Since the room is going to be flooded, why don't you move to another place? For example, your good classmate's ex-girlfriend's villa? There won't be such a sour smell there, right? I was wrong. Hu Jingyao surrendered. He leaned over and kissed Su Qingsang on the cheek. Wife, I was wrong. Seeing that Su Qingsang turned her face away and ignored him, he reached out and turned her face back. Wife, you know that there's really nothing between Qi Shiwei and me. There's nothing going on. I don't know. I don't follow you every day. How would I know what's going on between the two of you when I'm not around or when I don't see it? Right? Su Qingsang was unmoved. Hu Jingyao leaned over and kissed her lips again. Ever since I married you, other women have been air in my eyes. Su Qingsang avoided his kiss. She had originally wanted to settle the score with him, but now she was being tormented by him. She was a little annoyed. Yes, it's air. The air that I can hold in my arms. Wife? Hu Jingyao hugged her body in his arms again and pressed his forehead against hers. Wife, I was wrong this time. I'll definitely stay away from her next time. No matter what happens to her, I won't help her. I'll let others help her. Is that okay? Screw you. Even he didn't believe what he said. She wasn't such a petty person. I didn't stop you from helping her. If you want to help her, then help her. Otherwise, I'll be the villain. My wife is so kind. How can she be a villain? Even if she's a villain, she's the most beautiful villain in the world. Sweet talk. Sweet words are also for you alone. Wife, don't call me that. Su Qingsang's voice was a little hoarse. Speaking of which, she had originally wanted to settle the score with him. How did it turn into rolling in the sheets? Go, go, go. Su Qingsang pushed him away. I want to rest. Go clean up the living room. Seeing that he didn't move, she glared at him. If you don't go clean up, I'll let you sleep on the sofa tonight. You don't have to be so ruthless, do you? Ruthless? Then you'll sleep for a month. Wife? Speaking of which, that's a good idea. Su Qingsang nodded repeatedly as she spoke. If you hug another woman in the future, I'll let you sleep on the sofa. Hug once, sleep for a month. Hu Jinyao's face fell. Wife, are you serious? Quite serious. So, Mr. Hua, can you go clean up outside now? Go. I'll go right away. Hu Jinyao stood up and bitterly went to clean up the living room. Su Qingsang looked at his back and suddenly smiled. Thinking about how Hu Jinyao would clean up the room, she kind of wanted to see him. But forget it. There would always be a chance next time. Su Qingsang yawned and turned over. She was a little sleepy, so she went back to sleep. Su Qingsang had to go to work the next day. When she got up in the morning, Hu Jinyao followed her. I'll drive you. He was the one who picked her up yesterday. She didn't drive back. Su Qingsang didn't object. She was much more energetic after a night's rest. After getting into Hu Jinyao's car, she suddenly leaned over to look at Hu Jinyao when she fastened her seat belt. Will you take me to the hospital and visit Qi Shiwei on the way? Wife. For the first time, Hu Jinyao realized that Su Qingsang could be so petty. It's okay. Go ahead. I don't object. In fact, I'm going to visit her later too. Su Qingsang was indeed jealous yesterday, and she was indeed a little uncomfortable. However, after calming down, she wouldn't really take it to heart. With Qi Shiwei's appearance, it was normal for Hu Jinyao to visit her. It was understandable. Wife. Hu Jinyao stopped starting the car and looked at her warily. Don't tell me you're going to let me sleep on the sofa the moment I visit her? When he met Su Qingsang's gaze, Hu Jinyao was the first to lower his head. Wife, I was wrong. All right. Su Qingsang couldn't help but want to roll her eyes at him. For the past 2 days, he had been saying that he was wrong again and again. Those who didn't know better would think that she was very powerful. In fact, he was just apologizing verbally. In his heart, he might not even think that he was wrong. I'm not such a petty person. She's indeed in a special situation right now. It's only right for you to visit her. Su Qingsang's expression was very serious. There was no hint of reluctance or unhappiness. Hu Jinyao knew that she was just joking and reached out to rub her hair. My wife is indeed the best. Flattery didn't work. Su Qingsang glanced at him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. All right, drive your car, Wang Yao said. The two of them went to the hospital together. Su Qingsang first went to the office to change into a white coat. She had to go on ward rounds later anyway, so she wasn't in a hurry to see Qi Shiwei. After Hu Jinyao greeted her, he went to the ward to see Qi Shiwei. Perhaps it was because she had completely vented her emotions yesterday. Qi Shiwei's complexion today was much better than yesterday. When she saw Hu Jinyao coming, she even glanced behind him. Where's Qingsang? She's at work. She'll come over later. Qi Shiwei smiled. Sorry for the trouble. Hu Jinyao shook his head and looked at the ward. Xiao Jiang wasn't there. The 2 bodyguards he had hired were very responsible to guard outside. Where's Xiao Jiang? She went to prepare breakfast for me. I originally said that I was going to the cafeteria to eat. She insisted that it wasn't nutritious and went home to make soup for me. It's my fault. Hu Jinyao had never taken care of a pregnant woman before, so he didn't know. I'll get someone to arrange for you to deliver food later. No need. Qi Shiwei shook her head. You've already taken good care of me. There's nothing wrong with me eating in the cafeteria. Hu Jinyao didn't argue with her. In any case, he would just ask Yang Wenchang to arrange for her later. Qi Shiwei knew that Hu Jinyao was a man of his word, so she didn't want to argue with him. Jinyao, it's good that you're here today. I have something to ask of you. What? Help me take care of that poor child's funeral. Qi Shiwei thought of that poor child and smiled bitterly. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have troubled you with such a thing. But my health is very poor now. It's very difficult for me to even go to the bathroom. Seeing the worry in Hu Jinyao's eyes, the corners of her mouth twitched. Don't look at me like that. I'm really fine. I'm just too weak. Qing Sang should be aware of my situation. I just need to rest well and get my body well. Hu Jinyao frowned slightly, and his expression looked very serious. I don't mind. Leave this matter to me. I'll help you take care of it. Thank you, Jinyao. Although Qi Shiwei's voice sounded weak, the expression on her face and her entire body were strong. Although I don't want to trouble you after I return to the country, but I always seem to cause you trouble. The reason why she had handed the plan to Su Peijian was because she didn't want Hu Jinyao to see her pale, weak and haggard appearance. Who knew that after going around in circles he would still find out. She had troubled him so much again. We're friends? You're treating me like an outsider. Qi Shiwei nodded and didn't decline. I'm very relieved to leave this matter to you. I only have one request. My mother is buried in the West Mountain Cemetery. Let the poor child be the companion of my mother, if you please. After returning, she went to see her mother once and didn't mention anything about Lian Jin. She didn't want her mother to be in peace in heaven. Hu Jinyao was a man of action. In addition, today was Sunday. He called Yang Wenchang and asked him to make arrangements for the crematorium and the cemetery. These weren't too difficult. With money they could do it right away. After contacting him, Yang Wenchang was also on his way. A car came from the crematorium and sent the child there. However, when Hu Jinyao went to the morgue, he was told that the child was gone. Hu Jinyao was very surprised. The child was still there yesterday. He didn't go to Qi Shiwei to tell her about this first. Instead, he went to Su Qingsang. What did you say? The child is gone? How was that possible? Yes. Hu Jinyao didn't understand what went wrong. Su Qingsang glanced at him. They were in the hospital. In a place like the morgue, there would be strange legends from time to time, but she had never heard of a corpse being lost. Wait a minute, I'll go with you to take a look. Today was Sunday and there was only one doctor on duty. That doctor's surname was Gu. Su Qingsang asked for a long time, but Dr. Gu only said that he didn't see it. This was too strange. This morgue wasn't anywhere else. How could a baby's body disappear just like that? Dr. Su, I only started work this morning. If you want to know, why don't you ask Dr. Xie, who was on duty before? Or go check the surveillance cameras. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao looked at each other and saw their own guesses in each other's eyes. To confirm it, Su Qingsang went to the security office again. She pulled out the surveillance video. Sure enough, they saw it through the surveillance video. Early this morning, before the hospital started working, Lian Jin first went to the ward to visit Qi Shiwei. Qi Shiwei was sleeping at that time. After that, Lian Jin went to the medical administration division. In the end, he went to the morgue and took the child away. The doctor on duty in the morning wasn't Dr. Gu, but Dr. Xie. So Dr. Gu didn't know either. When Su Qingsang saw this, she took out her phone and pulled up the contact list of all the doctors in the hospital. She called Dr. Xie. Dr. Xie had an impression of this matter. After all, there weren't many people who came to claim a corpse early in the morning, let alone the corpse of a baby who had died young. Dr. Su, that child was taken away by that gentleman in my hands. However, he had the procedures. He said that he was the child's father. He also showed us the relevant documents. Su Qingsang hung up the phone and glanced at Hu Jinyao. Qi Shiwei and Lian Jin's relationship as husband and wife hadn't been dissolved. Lian Jin was still Qi Shiwei's husband and the child's father. If he wanted to take the child away, Qi Shiwei couldn't do anything about it. Is he crazy? Su Qingsang couldn't understand for a moment. The child was already dead. What did Lian Jin want to do? Hua Jinyao didn't say anything. He glanced at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang thought of Qi Shiwei's pale face. How do you think we should tell her about this? Hua Jinyao also had a headache. I'll find Lian Jin first. Is it useful? He might not hand over the child at all. What do you think he wants to do by taking the child away? To be honest, even though Su Qingsang had seen all kinds of strange things in the hospital, this situation still made her hair stand on end. After all, it wasn't a living child. It was already dead. What was Lian Jin trying to do? I don't know. Hua Jinyao actually vaguely understood, but he wasn't sure yet. Don't tell Qi Shiwei about this for now. Su Qingsang's words made Hua Jinyao frown. She'll find out sooner or later. Of course she'll find out. But her body is so weak now. If she finds out that Lian Jin took her child away, I don't know what she'll do. If she's too agitated or her emotions fluctuate too much, it won't be good for her body's recovery. Su Qingsang didn't mean to lie to Qi Shiwei. However, she could hide it kindly. Use this time to find Lian Jin and ask him to hand over the child. Hua Jinyao thought about it and didn't object. Su Qingsang's words made sense. Qi Shiwei's current condition wasn't good. Let her rest well. It's best if I can find him. What if I can't? What if he found Lian Jin and he refused to hand over the child? Legally speaking, he did have the right to dispose of the child's body and make arrangements for the child's funeral. Then we'll talk about it after this month. One had to know that Qi Shiwei hadn't had her stitches removed yet. Even if the stitches were removed, she would have to do at least a full month of confinement. If there's anything else, we'll talk about it after she's out of confinement. Okay. Hua Jinyao nodded. He looked at Su Qingsang and suddenly reached out to hug her. Why, thank you. Don't thank me. I'm just doing my duty as a doctor. It's not because of you. Su Qingsang's words made Hua Jinyao laugh. He rubbed her hair with a doting expression. Yes. You're a good doctor. She was also a good wife. As expected, Hua Jinyao didn't tell Qi Shiwei about the baby. When he went to the hospital to see her the next day, he only said that he had taken care of the matter. Meanwhile, he tried to contact Lian Jin to ask him what he wanted to do. Hua Jinyao searched for a few days but he couldn't find Lian Jin. This was really strange. There was actually someone he couldn't find. He kept this matter a secret. Qi Shiwei didn't know anything about it. The child she thought had been properly buried had already been taken away by Lian Jin. A week later, the sutures on Qi Shiwei's wound were removed. He could go back to his home and rest. Originally, Hua Jinyao had arranged a confinement center for her, but now that there were no children to take care of, he sent her back to the villa. He and Su Qingsang sent it together. Hua Jinyao didn't dare to send Qi Shiwei off alone. It didn't matter if he was here to see Qi Shiwei or if he had something to tell her. They all dragged Su Qingsang to the scene. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh at the way he looked at her. She knew that he was expressing his goodwill to her and that there was nothing between him and Qi Shiwei. Even if he didn't do that, Su Qingsang wouldn't really be angry or do anything to him. After sending Qi Shiwei back to the villa, he asked Xiao Jiang and another new cook to take good care of Qi Shiwei. Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang stood up and said goodbye. Unexpectedly, when he was about to leave, Qi Shiwei suddenly called out to him. Jinyao, take me to see that child sometime. Hua Jinyao was stunned for a moment and glanced at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang received his gaze and turned to face Qi Shiwei. Shiwei, you're not out of confinement yet. You can see the child anytime you want. When you're out of confinement, you can see him again. Okay. After resting for a few days, Qi Shiwei's face finally wasn't as pale as before. I just want to see him. In fact, with my mother accompanying him, I believe he'll be fine. People were very strange. When there was nothing else to do, they might not necessarily believe in ghosts and gods. However, when a family member passed away, they wished that ghosts and gods really existed in this world. At least, that was a form of psychological comfort. After coming out of Qi Shiwei's villa, Su Qingsang glanced behind her. You haven't found Lian Jin yet? No. Hua Jinyao had a headache. He knows how to hide. Lian Jin was actually also from Rong City. He was very familiar with Rong City. In such a big city with a population of more than 20 million, it wasn't difficult to hide. Right. Su Qingsang seemed to have thought of something. Do you think it's possible that he's not hiding? Huh. If he wasn't hiding, then why couldn't he be found? Chapter 618. No matter how much Lian Jin and Qi Shiwei didn't get along, that was still his own child, right? He might not have taken the child away because he had any dirty intentions. Previously, Hu Jinyao and Su Qingsang had both thought that perhaps Lian Jin wanted to keep the child so that he could threaten Qi Shiwei. It wasn't impossible. But now a week had passed. If he really wanted to threaten Qi Shiwei or if he still wanted to use the child to hurt Qi Shiwei, there were clearly plenty of opportunities. If he didn't do so, didn't it mean that he might have gone to deal with the child's funeral himself? It wasn't that Hu Jinyao hadn't thought of this possibility before. However, there are only a few cemeteries in Rong City. If that's the case, there's no reason why I can't find him. Then what if he didn't bury the child in the cemetery at all? Before Rong City was reformed, it was also the oldest burial ground. There were only a few mountains around Rong City, and there were also cemeteries of all sizes. Some of them were even cemeteries with excellent feng shui that had long been circled by some aristocratic families. Lian Jin was from Rong City, so his family might also have such a situation. If that was the case, then he might have already buried the child. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes. He was only thinking about the cemetery, but he didn't think about the mountain grave. However, he touched his chin, and there was a hint of doubt in his tone. Why do I feel that he doesn't seem like someone who would do such a good thing? Not necessarily. Su Qingsang was a doctor, so she was more inclined to think of people in the best possible light. No matter what, he's the child's father. It's understandable that he would do his best for the child. Right? Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. Looking at the seriousness in Su Qingsang's eyes, he suddenly leaned over and kissed her on the forehead. All right. I'll ask Yang Wenshang to check the mountain graves in Rong City. It was true that Rong City was very big, but it wasn't every day that a funeral happened, especially for such a young child. It would probably be found out with a simple check. Su Qingsang nodded and followed Hu Jinyao to the parking lot, but she suddenly stopped. Hu Jinyao. Yes. If that's really the case, I'm afraid Qi Shiwei will take it to heart again, right? She wanted to bury the child beside her mother, but Lian Jin had disposed of the child in private. If they were really buried in some mountain grave, Qi Shiwei would definitely not agree to it. By then the child would already be buried. If Qi Shiwei was unwilling, they would make another fuss. Why did she feel that Qi Shiwei and Lian Jin's relationship was even more difficult to sever? Naturally, Hu Jinyao could also think of what she could think of. Thinking of Lian Jin sending Su Qingsang to prison, his expression was uneasy. He really has a good plan. Lian Jin secretly took the child away with this thought in mind. There was probably another layer. He wanted Qi Shiwei to take the initiative to lower her head? Unfortunately, he underestimated Qi Shiwei's stubbornness. He was afraid that she would not compromise easily. When he met Su Qingsang's clear eyes, he cleared his throat. However, that naturally has nothing to do with us. Let them be. Su Qingsang smiled faintly and pinched Hu Jinyao's hand. I'm not against you helping Qi Shiwei. She's your classmate. She's helped you time and time again and she saved your life. If she's in trouble, it's human nature for you to help her. It's also a sign of friendship. However, I don't approve of you interfering in the matter between Qi Shiwei and her husband. Qingsang? No matter how much Qi Shiwei and Lian Jin argue, they are still husband and wife. It doesn't matter if they quarrel or hate each other. It's their own business. As bystanders, it's better for us not to interfere. Hu Jinyao pursed his lips into a straight line. Naturally, he wouldn't interfere in the matter between Qi Shiwei and her husband. However, he didn't like Lian Jin, so it was fine for him to play some tricks on him. Blinking, he opened the car door for Su Qingsang. All right, wife, don't worry. I'll listen to you. Su Qingsang turned her face to look at him. Suddenly, she moved her face closer and met his eyes. Why don't I believe you? Wife. Hu Jinyao covered his heart with one hand. I'm so sad that you think of me like that. Do you think I'm the kind of person who meddles in other people's business? Indeed not. He was just a little petty. He would repay those who had schemed against him. Su Qingsang didn't dare to say the last sentence. Seeing that Hu Jinyao was still clutching his heart, she couldn't help but laugh. She went forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. All right, I was wrong, okay? My Mr. Hua is the most aloof. He doesn't like to meddle in other people's business, and he's the most magnanimous. Is that okay? Tisk, wife. If you praise me like that, you might as well not praise me at all. Hu Jinyao put his arm around her waist. He leaned over and kissed her on the lips. You're so reluctant to praise me. Wouldn't you rather not praise me? Why would I be reluctant? In my heart, my dear husband is wise and mighty. I'm very willing. Hearing that, Hu Jinyao moved his lips to her ear and said, If you're willing, how about we do it tonight? As he spoke, he actually bit her earlobe gently. Su Qingsang's face heated up. She looked around. Fortunately, there was no one nearby. Otherwise she would be really embarrassed. Hu Jinyao smiled and leaned over to bite her again. I'm kissing my own wife. What's there to be afraid of? This person had really become more and more improper recently. Su Qingsang wanted to laugh at him, but when she thought that she was the one who made him unable to control himself, she felt relieved. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. Lian Jin hadn't been found yet. Hu Jinyao took this matter to heart and asked Yang Wenchang to send people to look for him. However, a few days had passed but there was still no news. It was as if Lian Jin had disappeared from this world. Hu Jinyao didn't believe that he would let it go just like that. If he really didn't pester her anymore, it would be a good thing for Qi Shiwei. However, he was afraid that he would take away the baby and have some bad tricks up his sleeves. If that was the case, he would have to guard against it for Qi Shiwei. Although he had promised Su Qingsang that he would not interfere in their business, he would not allow anyone to bully his savior. Yang Wenchang knocked on the door when Hu Jinyao finished a video conference with the overseas company. When Hu Jinyao saw him, he thought that he was going to talk about Lian Jin's whereabouts. Unexpectedly, Yang Wenchang stood to the side, but Lu Tongjia was standing behind him. Seeing that it was her, Hu Jinyao's expression didn't change. Thinking of what Lu Tongjia had said in the hospital, he still stood up. Yang Wenchang brought the person and left. The office door closed and Lu Tongjia walked in. She seemed a little embarrassed. Hu Jinyao was a little surprised to see her standing there without moving. Lu Tongjia seemed to be getting more and more careful in front of him recently. Mom, what's the matter? These words were spoken calmly, and there was no hint of disgust. Lu Tongjia's heart was pierced again. She was Hu Jinyao's mother. Did she have to have a reason to visit her son? Nothing much. Why did she come to the company for no reason? Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows and thought of something he heard yesterday. Uncle and aunt seemed to have gone to the prison to see Hu Yifan yesterday, and then they went to the old mansion to see Grandpa, right? Although Grandpa had said that he wouldn't interfere with him taking over the company and had even made a will in advance. What he meant was that most of the shares under his name were going to be given to him. However, Grandpa was also a person who cared about family. If Uncle and Aunt couldn't stand it and pitted their son, they would beg Grandpa. Grandpa would definitely soften his heart again. Lu Tongjia looked at Hu Jinyao in astonishment. You got someone to follow them? It's not really following them. I just got someone to keep an eye on them. Hu Jinyao's voice was indifferent. He signed the document in his hand and put it aside. They've tried to make things difficult for me time and time again. I have to take precautions and strike first, right? What he said was right. Lu Tongjia still didn't think that she was wrong. However, she wasn't here to say that today. Are you free tomorrow? Tomorrow? What's the matter? No. It's just that your grandfather said that you haven't been back to the old mansion for dinner for a long time. Recently, because he was busy with Qi Shiwei's matter, Hu Jinyao hadn't been back to the old mansion for a while. However, tomorrow wasn't a weekend. For his grandfather to say that, it might not mean that he really wanted to see him. Hu Jinyao looked at his schedule. Other than special circumstances, his daily work had already been arranged. I'm not free. He had an appointment with a company tomorrow night. In the evening, Su Qingsang said that she wasn't on duty and that there was a new movie that she wanted to watch. He had already promised Su Qingsang, so naturally he wouldn't go back on his word. Speaking of which, there was a home theater at home. With his status, if he wanted a new movie, he could just ask someone and send it over. However, Su Qingsang liked to go to the cinema to watch movies. She said that she liked that feeling even more. In the past few days, perhaps because of Qi Shiwei's matter, he and Su Qingsang had been a little more intimate and casual. This was a very rare experience. He didn't get tired of interacting with a woman. Instead, every day he wanted to get closer to her more and more. The more he interacted with Su Qingsang, the more he found her shining points and the more he loved her. She was cold but not cold. She was smart but not stiff. She was kind but not blind. Other than occasionally attending his childhood gatherings, the two of them stayed at home and were busy with their own things. Occasionally they went out on dates just like lovers nowadays. This feeling was very subtle. The smile on his face was very shallow and fleeting, but it didn't escape Lu Tongjia's eyes. Judging from his expression, he must have thought of Su Qingsang. However, he sent Lu Tongjia away with 2 cold words. She sat there and felt her entire body turn cold. Is there anything else? Hu Jinyao took Lu Tongjia's soft words that day as a momentary lapse in judgment. Lu Tongjia didn't say anything. She stood up and walked out in a daze. In fact, tomorrow was her birthday. She hoped that if possible, Hu Jinyao would come to celebrate her birthday. All these years, because she didn't like Hu Jinyao, and because she hadn't recovered from the shock of losing a son and a daughter, she hadn't been able to celebrate her birthday for more than 10 years. However, Hu Jinyao didn't know that it was her birthday, and he didn't plan to celebrate it with her. He even rejected her with such a cold attitude. Lu Tongjia was filled with sadness. What she cared about now wasn't her birthday. She only cared that her relationship with Hu Jinyao seemed to be irreparable. Hu Jinyao picked up the documents beside him. Occasionally he would look over from the corner of his eye and see Lu Tongjia's lonely back. His brows furrowed slightly again. What's wrong? Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jinyao and found that he was a little absent-minded. The two of them had just finished eating, and Su Qingsang was organizing the papers on her laptop. Hu Jinyao sat on the other side and took care of some work on his laptop. After organizing the papers and saving them, she found that Hu Jinyao seemed to be in a daze as he stared at the screen. She leaned in front of him, but he didn't react at all. She raised her hand and waved it in front of him. Hu Jinyao finally came back to his senses. I'm fine. He just suddenly thought of Lu Tongjia's appearance today. You don't look like you're fine. Su Qingsang looked at him, and her first reaction was to think of Qi Shiwei. Could it be that Qi Shiwei found out that Lian Jin took the child away? Hu Jinyao shook his head and looked at Su Qingsang. In the end, he casually mentioned that Lu Tongjia had come to look for him today. Your mother asked you to come home for dinner tomorrow? Yes. Su Qingsang pursed her lips slightly. Lu Tongjia rarely came to look for them except for Hu Jinyao's birthday last time. Your mother looked for you just to ask you to come home for dinner? You don't believe it either, do you? Hu Jinyao didn't believe it either. I didn't expect her to think so highly of Hui Yifan. In order to plead for Hui Yifan, she had repeatedly expressed her goodwill to him and spoke gently and softly. Hu Jinyao admitted that he was a little uncomfortable. It was also because of this discomfort that he didn't think of showing mercy when he dealt with Hui Yifan. Su Qingsang saw the unhappiness that flashed through his eyes. She thought of Lu Tongjia's reaction on Hu Jinyao's birthday, but she didn't think that was the case. Su Qingsang confirmed her guess the next day. She called back to the old mansion. The person who answered the phone was the butler, Uncle Cheng. Uncle Cheng had been the butler of the Hua family for more than 20 years. Su Qingsang asked tentatively and the answer came out. It turned out to be Lu Tongjia's birthday. She didn't say much and hung up the phone. Su Qingsang sat in the office and was a little lost in thought. Today was Lu Tongjia's birthday. She went to look for Hu Jinyao yesterday because she hoped that he could celebrate her birthday with her. Su Qingsang stood up and went next door to tell Sun Huiya. She came back, changed her clothes, picked up her bag and left. After driving out of the hospital, Su Qingsang had a headache. With Lu Tongjia's status, she naturally didn't lack anything. As a result, she didn't know what to give. Moreover, this gift was given on behalf of Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang thought for a moment and called Li Qinxue to ask for her opinion. After hanging up the phone, Su Qingsang's car stopped at the intersection of Wenhua Street. She got out of the car and walked less than 200 meters forward to the entrance of Gulangxian. This was the largest antique shop in Rong City. When she had a gathering with Hu Jinyao's group of childhood friends, she had heard someone mention that this was opened by Wan Xianyang's family. She didn't plan to announce Wan Xianyang's name when she entered the door. She first looked around in the shop. In fact, she rarely came to such a place. Gulangxian was located in the middle of a cultural street in Rong City. This was the largest shop on this street. There were 3 floors. It was designed to imitate the old counters in ancient times. There were all kinds of vases and ornaments on the antique shelves around it. Su Qingsang didn't know much about antiques, so she thought that they were old. The shopkeeper inside seemed to be entertaining guests. When he saw Su Qingsang come in, he didn't immediately come over to greet her. Su Qingsang didn't mind. She first looked at the antique shelf. She had already decided that if she couldn't pick out anything, she would call Wan Xianyang. After all, it was just a thought. It didn't matter what gift it was. She took a few steps and stopped in front of a jade carving. This jade carving wasn't big. It was only the size of 2 palms. However, in such a small place, it was carved with the 8 immortals crossing the sea. Every immortal was lifelike, and even the magic artifacts in the hands of the 8 immortals looked extremely exquisite. This jade ornament was not bad, and it could be given as a gift. However, it didn't seem appropriate to give it to a female elder. Do you like this? A voice suddenly sounded behind her. Su Qingsang was startled. The familiar voice made her quickly turn her head, only to find that it was Zhang Yichen standing behind her. Seeing that it was him, Su Qingsang was greatly surprised. It had been more than 2 months since she returned from Sea City for disaster relief. It had been more than 2 months since she last saw Zhang Yichen. He had become darker and seemed to have lost some weight. "Uncle." Su Qingsang bowed slightly. Her voice was a little uncomfortable. "Why are you here?" "I have a few days off, so I came to visit the old master. Next month is my father's birthday, so I wanted to come here to pick out a gift for him." "Oh." Su Qingsang nodded and didn't say anything else. Zhang Yichen looked at the jade carving. "Do you like this?" "It's not that I like it. I just think it's very exquisite." Su Qingsang thought for a moment and told the truth. "I want to give it to an elder, but I don't think it's appropriate. If you buy it for yourself to play with, it's fine. If you want to give it to someone, it's indeed inappropriate." "What?" She already had an idea, but because of Zhang Yichen's words she couldn't help but ask. "This jade is not jadeite. If you want to give it to someone as a gift, it's better to give it to someone as a gift." Su Qingsang was really a little embarrassed. "I don't quite understand. Isn't it all jade?" "It's not the same." As Zhang Yichen spoke, he glanced at the shopkeeper behind him, then turned to look at Su Qingsang. "If you want to give it to someone as a gift, their good stuff is upstairs. I'll take you there." Zhang Yichen was obviously very familiar with this place. As he spoke, he led Su Qingsang upstairs. Su Qingsang looked at his back and wanted to refuse, but she really didn't have much time to slowly choose now. When she went up to the second floor, she found that it was a completely different world. The storefronts below were dazzling. But the upstairs was of a different style. Different antique vases are placed in each of the compartments. But compared to the ones below, they were much more exquisite. Wan Xianying likes to play, but he has a good eye for antiques. His ancestors were in the antique business, so he's been influenced by them since he was a child. He's good at this. He rarely makes mistakes with the things he collects. You can take a look. Zhang Yichen slowed down a little, glanced around, and seemed to be explaining to her casually. "Okay." Su Qingsang trusted the abilities of Hua Jinyao's childhood friends. Wan Xianying had told her a few times to come and take a look when she had the chance. She casually walked a few steps and found that Zhang Yichen had been about a meter in front of her. It was a good distance, a very safe distance. Well, it was a good distance. Su Qingsang glanced at him, then turned her eyes away and began to look around. There were many good things, but none of them were good enough for Lu Tongjia's birthday present. The Hua family had blue and white porcelain, ancient calligraphy and paintings after all. "What? You don't like anything?" "Not really." Su Qingsang didn't dare to say that she didn't like them. After all, every one of them was expensive. "I just don't think it's appropriate to give them away." "An elder? A female elder?" "Yes." Su Qingsang didn't deny it. Zhang Yichen looked a little serious. He glanced at her and said, "Let's go to the 3rd floor." Su Qingsang wasn't surprised at how familiar he was with this place now. She followed him upstairs and found that it was even emptier. There were a few rooms inside. A waiter came over and greeted Zhang Yichen first. "Mr. Zhang, you're here. Should I call Mr. Wan over?" The waiter was very perceptive. Zhang Yichen had been here a few times, so he recognized him. "No need. I'll take a look first." Zhang Yichen glanced at the waiter as he spoke. "By the way, what can I give to an elder?" "Show us." "That's such a coincidence. Mr. Zhang, you're right to come today. Mr. Wan gambled on stones a few months ago and won a lot of good things. I just saw an honored guest off at the counter inside and I've just finished cleaning up. There are still a lot of treasures left. Come with me." "Lead the way." "This way, please." The waiter was very clever. He led Zhang Yichen and Su Qingsang to a small room on the side. They pushed the door open and entered. There was a small counter inside. There were many jade ornaments and some antiques on the shelves on both sides. There were a few paintings on the wall. They looked old, but Su Qingsang didn't know much about them. She just thought that the environment was very elegant and well decorated. While she was still admiring the paintings, the waiter had already led them to the counter. There were some bracelets on the counter. There weren't many, just a few. Even though Su Qingsang didn't know much about jade, she could tell that the jade was of high quality. The waiter was good at reading people's expressions. He didn't introduce them too much. After introducing the things in the room, he picked out 2 of the roundest ones and put them on the counter. "Mr. Zhang, what do you think of these 2? Su Qingsang hadn't taken her eyes off the other jade ornaments on the counter. What the waiter said next almost made her choke on her own saliva. "Mr. Zhang, look at this one. It's full of water and the quality is good. Do you think your girlfriend likes it?" Girlfriend? Who was his girlfriend? I'm not his girlfriend. Chapter 619. The waiter worked for Wan Xianying. Wan Xianying was Hu Jinyao's childhood friend. Even if the waiter was wrong, Su Qingsang didn't want Hu Jinyao to hear about such a misunderstanding. She explained so quickly that she didn't notice the strange look on Zhang Yichen's face. The waiter was a little embarrassed. He looked at Zhang Yichen and then at Su Qingsang. They didn't look like a couple. It was his fault for not asking clearly. Young Master Zhang, look at this mouth of mine. The waiter slapped him on the face lightly. He didn't apologize to Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang didn't want to waste time with this man. She glanced at the bracelet in his hand. Let me see. Okay. Look here. The waiter had made a slip of the tongue. He could only try to make up for it. Miss, look at this waterhead. This is the glass type from an old pit in Myanmar. This color, this transparency. I'm not bragging. Put this bracelet on your wrist. You'll look like a rich lady. Su Qingsang glanced at the waiter and couldn't help but laugh. Her eyes fell on the bracelet. It was indeed beautiful. Even someone like her, who didn't know anything about jewelry, could see that the bracelet was extraordinarily beautiful. She had some impression of Lu Tongjia's hands. They were very white and smooth. A bracelet like this was indeed very suitable for her. I'll take this one. Okay. The waiter had seen many customers who were straightforward, but Su Qingsang's decisiveness still surprised him. She answered without thinking, took the bracelet and wrapped it up. Su Qingsang took out her card and handed it to him to pay. Because Zhang Yichen was standing on the side, once the waiter left, only the two of them were left in the room. She felt a little uncomfortable being alone in a room with a man and a woman. She turned her face away and pretended to look around casually. The furnishings upstairs were all very exquisite. Not to mention the others, just the antique shelf looked like it had been there for a long time. Su Qingsang's interest was aroused. She glanced at the shelf on the side and was suddenly attracted by something. It was a jade carving, much more exquisite than the 8 immortals crossing the sea downstairs. The stone was not much bigger than a fist, and there were pavilions and terraces carved on it. However, there were tiny figures in the pavilions and terraces. He leaned over to take a closer look, and it turned out to be the 12 beauties of Jinling from Dream of the Red Chamber. Each of the 12 hairpins had their own representative action. Jade burying flowers, treasure hairpin catching butterflies, and so on. Although they looked small, they had both form and spirit. Even though Su Qingsang had seen a lot of good things after marrying Hu Jinyao, she was still amazed by the exquisiteness of this jade carving. If it weren't for the glass separating them, she would have reached out to touch it. What kind of craftsmanship was required to carve the jade into such a lifelike appearance? If you look carefully, you can almost see the expression on Lin Dayu's face, which is full of sorrow and sorrow. Su Qingsang couldn't help but stare at the jade carving for a long time. On the other side, the shop assistant had already wrapped up the jade and swiped the card. He handed the card and the small bag to Su Qingsang. Take it. There are also certificates inside. Everything that goes out of our Bogu Zhai has an ID card. You are welcome to find someone to verify its authenticity at any time. Su Qingsang didn't respond. Naturally, she was willing to believe in Wan Xianying. Speaking of which, that person had said that he wanted to chase Shi Mengwan to France. Who knew what happened after that? Maybe she could ask Shi Mengwan today. She took the things and found that Zhang Yichen was still there. She nodded slightly at him. Thank you, uncle. Thank you for today. You're welcome. Zhang Yichen's voice was indifferent. Wan Xianying isn't here, so I'll make the decision for him. Then I'll leave first. Okay. Wan Xianying walked to the side. Su Qingsang bowed and walked forward. After she left, Zhang Yichen glanced at the ornament she was looking at just now and told the shop assistant to wrap it up. He took the jade carving and picked out another gift for the old man. Zhang Yichen finally left. He thought that the dozens of minutes he was late was enough for Su Qingsang to leave. He didn't expect that when he walked to the antique street, he would find Su Qingsang still standing there. What's wrong? Su Qingsang was a little embarrassed to see him. Just now, she had casually walked around a small shop next to the antique street. When she came out, she found that her car was gone. My car seems to have been towed away. I'm taking a taxi here. He said that parking was not allowed here. Su Qingsang didn't know that. She looked at the faint white line on the ground. She thought it was a parking space. She didn't expect that it wasn't a parking space. Now her car was towed away. She wanted to take a taxi, but for some reason there wasn't a single taxi here. Parking is not allowed here. Taxis are not allowed either. Zhang Yichen's voice was indifferent. You've been in Rong City for a long time. Don't you know? It was a simple question without any intention of blaming her. But it successfully made Su Qingsang blush. She only had a few fixed places here. Most of the time she would be with Hu Jinyao. She really didn't pay much attention. Let's go. Where are you going? I'll give you a ride. As he spoke, he had already started walking forward. It's okay. I can walk to the front and take a taxi. Su Qingsang's words made Zhang Yichen turn around. His body was straight. His eyes fell on Su Qingsang's face. Are you afraid of me? Why would I? Su Qingsang was a little embarrassed. Speaking of which, he was not only Hu Jinyao's uncle, but also her savior. She twitched the corner of her mouth and smiled a little stiffly. Then I'll have to trouble you, uncle? The word uncle made Zhang Yichen's eyebrows almost imperceptibly furrow. He started walking forward. Su Qingsang was about a meter behind him, not too far away from him. After turning a corner, Su Qingsang saw the sign for the parking lot. She was too focused on buying Lu Tongjia a gift and was a little distracted. She got into Zhang Yichen's Hummer. He put the bag in the backseat. Su Qingsang saw him carrying the box just now. You bought what you wanted? Yes. Where are you going? Su Qingsang looked at the time. She had wanted to go back to the old house first. She looked at the time and saw that Hu Jinyao was still at work. Take me to Jinyao's company. I'm going to see him. When she said Hu Jinyao's name, even if she didn't notice it, Zhang Yichen could hear that her tone had softened a little. His expression didn't change. He calmly drove the car to Tianyu Group. It was very quiet in the car. During this time, Su Qingsang received a phone call. It was from Li Qianxue. She asked her how the gift shopping was going. Su Qingsang told her about the bracelet she had just picked out. Li Qianxue didn't say anything. She only told her that she had to prepare for such things in advance next time. Although the bracelet wasn't unpresentable, it still didn't seem sincere enough. Although Li Qianxue didn't like Lu Tongjia, Su Qingsang was already the daughter-in-law of the Huo family. Of course, she wanted her daughter to live a harmonious life. Su Qingsang chatted with Li Qianxue for a while. Because she was talking to her mother, her voice sounded a little intimate. The hospital isn't busy recently. It's okay. There's nothing else. You video call me every day. Something happened to me you would have known long ago. Speaking of which, Su Qingsang was glad that she had left soon after being taken away by the police. Otherwise, Li Qianxue would have been worried. Mom, I'm already a grown-up. Why are you still talking about this? I know. Yes. Okay. I will. Su Qingsang didn't know what the other side of the phone said, but her voice was tinged with a smile. All right. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry about me and Hu Jinyao. We have a good relationship. We even made plans to watch a movie together tonight. However, she couldn't go. She had to go back to the old house to celebrate Lu Tongjia's birthday. Hearing Li Qianshue's words, Su Qingsang smiled again. Yeah, it's okay. She was a little coquettish. She didn't need to care about what the person on the other end of the phone was saying. She just needed to look at her. Her eyes were curved and there was a smile on her lips. Zhang Yichen glanced at her and pursed his lips a little more. He looked forward again. Seeing the signal light turn green, he started the car again. Not long after Su Qingsang hung up the phone, the expression on her face wasn't as relaxed as she appeared to be. Ever since Su Peijian lost so much face in Lin City and tried to set her up, she and the Li family had a tacit understanding not to mention Su Peijian again. Including this time when Su Peijian went to jail. She didn't tell Li Qianxue either. Now she was a little conflicted. Li Qianxue and her grandfather didn't know. They didn't know, so they didn't know. But should she tell Su Qinghui or not? We're here. Zhang Yichen's voice snapped her out of her trance. Looking at the Tianyu Group building in front of her, Su Qingsang turned around and thanked Zhang Yichen before getting out of the car. Qingsang, your things? Su Qingsang found that her bag had fallen in the car. She really found that she seemed to always let Zhang Yichen see her a little embarrassed. She quickly picked up the bag and headed to the Tianyu Group. Su Qingsang didn't recover until she entered the elevator. She went upstairs to look for Hu Jinyao. He happened to be in a meeting. Su Qingsang looked at the time. There was still half an hour before he got off work. The other secretaries in the secretarial office knew Su Qingsang, so they didn't dare to neglect her and led her to the office to sit down. Mrs. Hua, President Hua's meeting will end in 10 minutes. You can wait for him here. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Zhang Yang and Yang Wenchang accompanied Hu Jinyao to the meeting. Otherwise, a small secretary like her wouldn't have the chance to entertain Su Qingsang. After placing the flowers on the table for Su Qingsang, the secretary left. Su Qingsang sat on the sofa, took out her phone and scrolled through her WeChat moments. She didn't have many friends. Other than family and friends, most of them were colleagues and classmates in the hospital. Sometimes, people would discuss Weibo in their WeChat moments. There would often be some academic exchanges which were quite interesting. Before she finished scrolling through her WeChat moments, Hu Jinyao had already arrived. When he entered the door, he didn't know that Su Qingsang was also there. Zhang Yang and Yang Wenchang followed behind him. I don't want to delay the merger any longer. Hurry up and solve it. And the land in H City, let the people in the branch company. Qingsang? Su Qingsang stood up at that moment and smiled at Hu Jinyao. Jinyao, Secretary Zhang, Assistant Yang. Hello, Mrs. Hua. Hello, Mrs. Hua. You guys go out first. Do as I say for the rest of the matter. Yes. The two of them quickly left. After the door closed, Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang, who was walking towards him, and reached out to put his arm around her waist. What's wrong? Didn't we just make an appointment to watch a movie tonight? Why are you so eager to see me? Yes. Su Qingsang also put her arms around his waist. Can't I? It's my honor. Hu Jinyao kissed her on the lips. As if he had thought of something, he said, I had a contract to sign tonight. In order to focus on the date with you, I signed the contract in the afternoon. How is it? How's your husband? Yes. My husband is the best in the world. Hu Jinyao pinched her nose and withdrew his hand under her protesting gaze. Let's go. What do you want to eat tonight? I'll listen to you. Then let's go to private restaurant. Hu Jinyao tidied up the things on the table, then picked up the car key. It's new, but I went with Cheng Xianyun and the others last time. Tastes good. Okay. Su Qingsang didn't object. Her hand touched her bag, which still contained her gift for Lu Tongjia. When Hu Jinyao came over, she walked in front of him and reached out to hook her arm with his. The two of them went out and entered the elevator. Su Qingsang suddenly turned her face. Jinyao? Yes. Speaking of which, it seems that we haven't gone back to see Grandpa and the others for a long time. Why don't we go back to see Grandpa? You mean back to the old house? Yes. You see, Aunt Zhou and Aunt Wang's cooking is no worse than outside. Why should we go out to eat? Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes and looked at her. Su Qingsang said calmly, What do you think? I haven't eaten Aunt Zhou's cooking and Aunt Wang's soup for a long time. Why don't we go home for dinner today? He stared at her face for a long time. The elevator had reached the first floor. Hu Jinyao glanced at her and finally nodded. Okay. The car stopped in the parking lot outside the Hu mansion. When Hu Jinyao got out of the car, he saw the Hummer at first glance. He glanced at Su Qingsang, then stared at the Hummer for a long while. Su Qingsang blinked. She didn't expect that Zhang Yichen would come. Didn't he say that he was going back to see his father? Let's go. Hu Jinyao withdrew his gaze and put his arm around Su Qingsang's shoulder. Lu Tongjia sat in her room. She didn't look too good. Hu Mingguang came back very early today. He knew that it was Lu Tongjia's birthday. Happy birthday. He gave the gift that he had prepared in advance to Lu Tongjia. Lu Tongjia took it and thanked him. She didn't even want to open the gift. She just put it aside. Hu Mingguang sat down next to her. What's wrong? Don't you like my gift? Lu Tongjia shook her head. Hu Mingguang sighed and said, Should I call Jinyao and ask him to come back? I don't want you to call him back. If he wants to come back, he can come back on his own. So what if he came back? He didn't really come to celebrate her birthday. If Hu Mingguang had to beg him to come back, he might as well not come back. Hu Mingguang was about to say something when someone knocked on the door. Soon, Uncle Cheng's voice came from outside. Sir, Madam. Young Master and Young Madam are back. Okay, got it. Hu Mingguang responded. He turned to look at Lu Tongjia with a faint smile in his eyes. Okay, he's back. He came on his own. Lu Tongjia's eyes were filled with joy. But soon she glared at Hu Mingguang. You really didn't call him back? I didn't. Hu Mingguang took her hand and asked her to go downstairs with him. Jinyao must have remembered that it's your birthday today, so he came to celebrate it with you. Hu Mingguang's words made Lu Tongjia smile even more. She quickened her steps. Hu Mingguang felt a little emotional seeing his wife like this. If it hadn't been for what happened years ago, Lu Tongjia and Hu Jinyao would have been like any other mother and son. Although they had wasted more than 10 years, it wasn't too late to make up for it from now on. The two of them went downstairs together. Lu Tongjia's joyful face froze when she saw Zhang Yichen. Cousin-in-law. Zhang Yichen stood up first and greeted them. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao also stood up. Dad. Mom. Dad. Auntie. Yes, Lu Tongjia responded. She looked at Zhang Yichen and then at Su Qingsang. It turned out that Hua Jinyao's disgust for Su Qingsang was back. She walked very slowly to the sofa and sat down. Hua Mingguang followed her. Of course he didn't know what Lu Tongjia was thinking. He was very close to Zhang Yichen, his cousin. The group of people sat down again. Old Master Hua sat on one side of the U-shaped sofa. Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang sat opposite him, while Zhang Yichen sat next to Old Master Hua, which was the middle seat. Lu Tongjia and Hua Mingguang came down. Zhang Yichen stood up and gave them the seat close to Old Master Hua. He sat on the other side. However, this way he sat close to Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao. Lu Tongjia's face darkened when she saw that. Hua Mingguang noticed that his wife didn't look well, so he turned to Hua Jinyao. Jinyao, what brings you here today? I remember that you have a contract to sign today? I signed it this afternoon. Hua Jinyao glanced at Su Qingsang and said, Qingsang said that she wanted to see Grandpa, so we came over. He was happy to show Su Qingsang's power in front of the Hua family, and he was also happy to make Su Qingsang look good in front of the Hua family. Su Qingsang nudged him gently. How could he talk like that? What did he mean by she wanted to see Grandpa? Didn't he want to see him? Grandpa, don't listen to his nonsense. He wanted to see you himself. Old Master Hua's stroke was serious, but it wasn't serious either. After almost having a stroke, his hands trembled a little when holding things, but other than that he was fine. After being discharged from the hospital, there were professional doctors and nurses to take care of Old Master Hua. Hua Jinyao was actually very concerned about him. Lu Tongjia's face darkened. So these two people didn't even know her birthday? Were they only here to see Old Master Hua? Su Qingsang saw Lu Tongjia's face from the corner of her eye. After knowing that she had come to see Hua Jinyao yesterday, she suddenly understood Lu Tongjia's pride and awkwardness. Speaking of which, although it's important to see Grandpa, there's something more important today. Chapter 620. What? Old Master Hua couldn't be blamed for forgetting Lu Tongjia's birthday. Lu Tongjia had been unwilling to celebrate her birthday for the past decade. He was getting on in years, so he naturally forgot about it. Today is Andy's birthday. As Su Qingsang spoke, she took out the box containing the jade bracelet from her bag and nudged Hua Jinyao. Jinyao and I went to pick out this gift early in the morning. Annie, this is for you. I wish you a happy birthday and a long life. Su Qingsang wanted Hua Jinyao to take the gift to Lu Tongjia. However, Hua Jinyao was also stunned by her words. When he came in just now, Old Master Hua's expression didn't change. He didn't look like he pitied Hua Yifan and didn't want her to save him. He finally understood why Lu Tongjia had come to him yesterday and asked him to come back for dinner tonight. So today was Lu Tongjia's birthday? He looked at the box in Su Qingsang's hand. It was the packaging of Wan Xianyang's Gu Langxian. He knew at a glance. He turned to look at Su Qingsang. She was thoughtful. Su Qingsang was also looking at him. She stared at the box and signaled for him to take it and give it to Hua Jinyao. Who was Lu Tongjia? Hearing Su Qingsang's words, her heart was filled with joy. But looking at her son's performance, how could she not know? Perhaps Hua Jinyao didn't even know his birthday, and Su Qingsang was just telling him. Looking at the box in Su Qingsang's hand, she lost all interest in it. Especially when she saw that Hua Jinyao was staring at the box in a daze and had no intention of handing it over, she felt even more suffocated. If her son didn't sincerely celebrate her birthday and didn't even know it was her birthday, then what was the point of celebrating? Old Master Hua also realized that it was Lu Tongjia's birthday today. Being a smart man, he could easily tell that Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang were behaving like this. He immediately laughed. Look, I'm getting old and my memory is getting worse. He had forgotten that it was Tongjia's birthday. It was also my fault. Aching, go to my room later and take out the set of emerald jewelry that the old woman left for Tongjia to celebrate her birthday. The butler, Uncle Cheng, who was standing at the side, was a smart person. He immediately replied, yes. I'll go get it now. How is that appropriate? Lu Tongjia knew what Old Master Hua was talking about emeralds. It was a set of extremely precious jewelry left behind by old Madame Hua. The old lady used to like it and often wore it. Later, as she grew older, she took it off and said that she would give it to her daughter-in-law. Although this was the case, the old master was still alive. He often thought of seeing things and didn't want to pass it on. It was only a small birthday present, so it was obvious that the gift was a little too much. After all, He had said that he would leave it to his daughter-in-law, not which daughter-in-law. Nian Chunya was still on the other end. There's nothing inappropriate about it. These farms will all be yours in the future. The old master waved his hand. Uncle Cheng had already brought the things over. Lu Tongjia had already seen the set of jewelry, so she wasn't in a hurry to open it. She was not in a good mood even though she had received a gift. After all, the person she cared about and wanted the other party to remember her birthday didn't remember her birthday. Zhang Yichen was sitting there. He had been surprised when Su Qingsang walked into the room. He had heard from her that she was going to watch a movie with Hu Jinyao today, so he came over. He didn't expect that he would come here instead of going to the movie. He couldn't help but feel a little uneasy when they met. Especially when he met Hu Jinyao's understanding gaze. He wanted to get up and leave, but he felt that it would be too deliberate, so he continued to sit. He could only rejoice that he had already given a gift to old Master Hua when he came over from Gulangxian. Otherwise, Hu Jinyao might think too much about it if it was placed together with Su Qingsang's gift in the same packaging. Old Master Hua was in a good mood. He called Andy Zhou and asked the kitchen to add more food. He also asked Zhang Yichen to stay for dinner. Since he had spoken, Zhang Yichen had no reason to refuse. With this, Su Qingsang had a chance to give Hu Jinyao a look. No matter how much he didn't like Lu Tongjia on the surface, it was Lu Tongjia's birthday. As her son, he couldn't be too cold, could he? Hu Jinyao saw her look and knew that she was doing it for his own good. He felt a little helpless, so he reached out and pushed the box in front of Lu Tongjia. "Mom, happy birthday." These words were said very softly. Lu Tongjia was a little unhappy at first. Seeing Hu Jinyao like this, she couldn't get angry. Her dissatisfaction with Su Qingsang lessened a little and she took the gift. She opened it and saw that it was a bracelet of excellent quality. She glanced at Su Qingsang again. She knew that the bracelet was a good color. "You guys are very thoughtful." She put the bracelet back. In the end, she didn't dwell too much on the fact that Hu Jinyao didn't remember her birthday. With more than 10 years of estrangement, it was impossible to repair it in a day or two. She knew that she still felt a little sad. Hua Mingguang knew what she was thinking, so he reached out and squeezed her hand. Although the atmosphere wasn't particularly harmonious, it wasn't particularly awkward either. Hua Mingguang talked to Zhang Yichen, while Hu Jinyao talked to old Master Hua about the recent situation. As long as old Master Hua didn't ask him to get Hu Yifan out of prison, he was willing to cooperate with anything else. After dinner, Hu Jinyao hadn't played chess with old Master Hua for a long time, so the two of them played chess in the living room. Lu Tongjia saw that her son was staying to celebrate her birthday with her. They had been close during dinner, so she felt a little better. After instructing Aunt Zhou to bring some tea and snacks outside, she was about to leave when Uncle Cheng came in. "Madam, should I put this in the storeroom for you or in your room?" The whole family was a big family. Every time they received a gift, they had to register it. Next time they would have to return the favor. Old Master Hua wasn't the only one who had his own storeroom for treasures. Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia also had a room for their treasures. "Put it in my room." Although Hu Jinyao hadn't picked it out himself, it was the first gift the couple had sent. Lu Tongjia planned to wear it when she went out in a few days. "Got it, madam." Uncle Cheng was in charge of the Hua family's affairs. He took the box and was about to go upstairs. However, Lu Tongjia saw another box in his hand. "Wait a minute." She took a few steps forward and looked at the box in Uncle Cheng's hand. The packaging of the box was also from Gulangxian. "What is this?" "This." Uncle Cheng looked at the larger box and didn't understand why Lu Tongjia was suddenly interested in asking this. "This is a gift from Third Master Zhang to Old Master Hua. I was busy just now and forgot to put it in the storeroom." Although Zhang Yichen was young, he was senior. He was Hui Yangxiu's son and ranked third. The other two families called him Third Master Zhang. Hui Yangxiu's grandson called him Young Master Zhang. Third Master has good taste. It's a decoration made of sandalwood. It's said to be a new gift from Gulangxian. Old Master Hua likes it. Lu Tongjia didn't have time to see if the gift was exquisite or not, nor did she care if Old Master Hua liked it or not. She stared at the box. What else didn't she understand? Good. It was really good. Such a big green hat had been put on Hu Jinyao's head. He even used her as a cover. That was really enough. She was annoyed and angry. However, her face didn't change at all. "Since it's a gift from Zhang Yichen, take it and keep it." She was the mistress of the Hua family, so she naturally had the ability to not show her emotions. Now that she was provoked by the two similar boxes in front of her, she was so angry that her head was about to explode. However, her face didn't change at all. She waved for Uncle Cheng to leave, then turned around and walked into the living room. Halfway through she stopped again. She felt that she couldn't swallow her anger. Then she went to the living room. In the living room, Hua Jinyao and old Master Hua sat face to face and were talking. Su Qingsang sat next to Hua Jinyao. She didn't know how to play chess, but she was willing to sit there and accompany him. Zhang Yichen and Hua Mingguang sat next to old Master Hua. Zhang Yichen was about to leave. However, old Master Hua hadn't seen him for a long time and asked him to stay to talk. He hadn't had much rest since the disaster relief. This time he had a rare vacation, so he really wanted to see old Master Hua. He didn't refuse and talked about some things about the disaster relief. In fact, he had made 2 more great contributions this time. There was no need to talk about the dangers and the several times he had almost lost his life. He picked some small things and told old Master Hua little. However, because Su Qingsang was sitting opposite him, it looked like the 2 of them were sitting face to face. Seeing this, Lu Tongjia felt that her anger began to rise again, and a fire burned in her heart. Forcing herself to calm down, she took a few steps forward and looked at Su Qingsang. Qingsang, your grandfather and Hua Jinyao will play chess for a long time. Why don't you come to the garden with me? Do you want to take a walk to digest your food? Su Qingsang didn't have a good relationship with Lu Tongjia. She was a little surprised to hear Lu Tongjia call her. She couldn't help but glance at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao was focused on playing chess. Remembering that it was Lu Tongjia's birthday today, he didn't think much of it and nodded slightly at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang stood up and took Lu Tongjia's gesture as a gesture of goodwill. It's my honor that Auntie is interested. She stood up and followed Lu Tongjia outside. In the eyes of old Master Hua and Hua Mingguang, Lu Tongjia's gesture was a sign that she was willing to lower her status to show goodwill. They were relieved for a moment. Big families hoped for family harmony the most. Only Zhang Yichen stared in the direction where Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao left. When he looked away, there was a hint of contemplation in his eyes. Su Qingsang followed Lu Tongjia out of the courtyard. It was summer and Rong City was also very hot. Occasionally, a breeze blew in at night, adding a bit of coolness. Su Qingsang followed behind Lu Tongjia. She was surprised to see that Lu Tongjia was only walking to the back of the garden. She could only follow behind her slowly. The Hua family's garden was very large. There were many rare green plants and a special greenhouse. Lu Tongjia walked to the door of the greenhouse and pushed it open. She turned on the light, and the view of the greenhouse was unobstructed. Su Qingsang had stayed in the Hua family for a long time. Naturally, she knew how carefully the greenhouse was decorated. Seeing that Lu Tongjia didn't say anything, Su Qingsang's eyes fell on a rose. The rose was blue. She had grown it at home and it was rare for it to bloom so beautifully. This one is beautiful. Uncle Li has put in a lot of effort. Lu Tongjia didn't respond to her. She walked straight to Su Qingsang and looked her in the eye. She didn't hide her eyes at all. Su Qingsang felt a little strange when she was looked at with such disgust and disdain. Auntie? Don't call me that. Lu Tongjia only felt that Su Qingsang was dirty. Su Qingsang, you're so disgusting. What she said was a little unpleasant. Su Qingsang frowned. Auntie, if you just want to humiliate me, then I won't keep you company. Then I won't keep you company. She walked past Lu Tongjia to walk out of the greenhouse, but Lu Tongjia blocked her way and wouldn't let her leave. Su Qingsang, how can you be so shameless? Su Qingsang stood there without moving. Her expression was a little serious. What do you mean that you and Jinyao picked a gift for my birthday? You picked the gift yourself, didn't you? What does it have to do with Jinyao? So it was about that. Su Qingsang pursed her lips and said, I did choose the gift, but Jinyao, don't mention Jinyao to me. Lu Tongjia's voice rose a few octaves. She paced back and forth, stopped in front of Su Qingsang again, and reached out to point at her nose. You bewitched Jinyao and made him lose his mind. He listened to everything you said and believed everything you said? Auntie? Jinyao. Do you have Jinyao in your heart? Su Qingsang, tell me, who did you pick the gift with? Su Qingsang was stunned. Who did she pick the gift with? She picked it herself. She just met Zhang Yichen by chance. Can't tell you? Lu Tongjia sneered. Can't you tell me? Why don't I tell you? Zhang Yichen picked the gift with you. Husband and wife. What a shameless couple. You just want to hide your dirty thoughts. You came here to celebrate my birthday with me? Don't you think it's disgusting? Su Qingsang looked at Lu Tongjia stunned. She couldn't believe that Lu Tongjia would say something like that. Auntie, don't call me that. Lu Tongjia felt bad hearing Su Qingsang's voice. Don't you feel guilty? The two of you went out to have a secret date and you came here with my birthday to disgust me? Su Qing, do you think there's no one in the Huo family? You're sure that Jinyao likes you, cares about you, and turns a blind eye to your shameless behavior, aren't you? Su Qing couldn't help but frown. Her words were so harsh that even she couldn't help but frown. Auntie, Uncle and I are not what you think. Uncle? What uncle? You know he's your uncle? Aren't you filthy and disgusting? Lu Tongjia didn't want to hear Su Qingsang's explanation. She stared at her with a serious expression. Su Qingsang, I'm telling you there's only one way for you to go now. What? Divorce. Lu Tongjia's voice was extremely cold and merciless. I'm telling you you have to divorce Jinyao. Stay away from Jinyao and the Huo family. Divorce? Su Qingsang looked at Lu Tongjia and didn't take her words seriously. That's impossible. She had nothing to do with Zhang Yichen. Ever since the incident with Qi Shiwei, her relationship with Huo Jinyao had become as sweet as honey. How could she be willing to leave Huo Jinyao? Impossible? Su Qingsang, you can't be too shameless. Lu Tongjia really felt sorry for Huo Jinyao. Don't even think about seducing Jinyao. I'm telling you, I won't allow a woman like you to spend the rest of your life with Jinyao. Su Qingsang felt a headache coming on, but now she saw the difference. If Lu Tongjia said this to her before, it was because she felt that she had embarrassed the Huo family. Now that he said this, it seemed that he really felt sorry for Huo Jinyao. Auntie. Su Qingsang didn't want to explain her relationship with Zhang Yichen. Huo Jinyao trusted her anyway, so she didn't have to say too much. However, Lu Tongjia's identity was different. Uncle and I are not what you think. I just wanted to pick out a gift for you today, and I happened to go to Wan Xianyang's shop. You know that they all know each other. I didn't expect to see Uncle there. I'll say it again, I'll leave after I pick out a gift for you. If you insist on associating me with Uncle, it doesn't seem appropriate. Coincidence? Coincidental? You didn't expect it? Inappropriate? Lu Tongjia nodded repeatedly. You're good at finding excuses for yourself. Do you think I'll believe you just because you say that? Don't think that I don't know how many times you two have hugged in places where Jinyao can't see. Oh, and we don't need to see you. You can even do it in places where I can see you. It's ridiculous that you're still saying that for yourself. Auntie, don't you know what happened that time? Su Qingsang didn't want to bring up the past, but Lu Tongjia wouldn't let it go. She was angry. If you hadn't drugged Uncle, he wouldn't have lost his composure like that. I drugged him? Lu Tongjia was so angry with Huo Jinyao that she lost her mind, so she didn't defend herself. Seeing Su Qingsang like this, she was furious. How many times have you two hugged in places where I can't see? Do you still need me to drug that bastard Zhang Yichen? She used to admire Zhang Yichen and thought that it would be good if he could build a good relationship with Huo Jinyao. She hated Zhang Yichen so much now. Uncle and niece-in-law. How could he do that? No wonder Jinyao is so protective of you. I don't get along with him. You and Zhang Yichen did those dirty things, but you blamed me for it. Su Qingsang, you're really good at scheming. Su Qingsang was stunned by Lu Tongjia's words. She was not an idiot and she immediately found out that something was wrong. What did she mean by she and Zhang Yichen had hugged in places where she couldn't see? What did she mean by they didn't need her to drug them? What did she mean by she was blaming her? What? Are you feeling guilty? The two of you are openly hooking up with each other in the Huo family's territory. You're trying to drive a wedge between Jinyao and me. Su Qingsang, how can you be so vicious? She and Huo Jinyao's relationship had been weak for more than 10 years. But if it weren't for Su Qingsang, Huo Jinyao wouldn't have treated her like this. Su Qingsang ignored Lu Tongjia's words. She looked up at Lu Tongjia, who was agitated and seemed confused. Are you saying that on the day of the Dragon Boat Festival, you weren't the one who drugged Uncle? Su Qingsang, even at a time like this, you're still blaming me for what happened between you and Zhang Yichen? If it wasn't you, then who was it? Su Qingsang only cared about this question now. This was the Huo family. Who could do something to Zhang Yichen in the Huo family, and then put the blame on her? Su Qingsang, don't change the topic. Who drugged Zhang Yichen? If it weren't for you, no one would have had the chance, right? All right. I don't want to talk nonsense with you. You just need to promise me that you'll divorce Jinyao tomorrow. You don't have to talk about the rest. Who knew who had drugged them? Maybe it was just an act to deceive people? I won't divorce Jinyao. Su Qingsang wasn't in the mood to think about who drugged him. If she told Huo Jinyao about it later, he would find out immediately. She looked at Lu Tongjia and said in a low voice, Jinyao and I are husband and wife. Jinyao and I are husband and wife. Since we are married, it is impossible for us to divorce. Su Qingsang, what Qingsang wants to say is also what I want to say. Lu Tongjia froze for a second when she heard the voice. She turned around and found that Hu Jinyao had come out. He looked at Su Qingsang, who was standing in the greenhouse with a determined look on her face. He walked a few steps forward and stood in front of her. Mom, I won't divorce Qingsang. You won't divorce her? Don't you know that she cheated on you? Don't you know that she and you? Su Qingsang could do it, but Lu Tongjia didn't want her son to be too sad, so she didn't say it out loud. She couldn't swallow the anger in her heart. Hu Jinyao, if you're still a man, divorce her. If you're still a man, divorce her. Mom. Hu Jinyao looked at Lu Tongjia with a complicated look in his eyes. He looked at her carefully and found that she was much better than before, when he always looked at her with his guard up. I believe in Qingsang's character. Please believe in Qingsang's character as well. She won't do anything to hurt me. Hu Jinyao. Mom? This is all a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Lu Tongjia was furious. Hu Jinyao glanced at Su Qingsang and said, It's cold outside. You go in first. I need to talk to Mom. Jinyao? Su Qingsang looked at him worriedly. She wasn't worried that Hu Jinyao wouldn't believe her. She was just worried that he would argue with Lu Tongjia. Today is Andy's birthday. I don't need your fake kindness. Lu Tongjia got even angrier when Hu Jinyao mentioned her birthday. Su Qingsang used the excuse of buying her a birthday present to meet Zhang Yichen in private. As soon as she arrived, she would feel uncomfortable and flustered. Su Qingsang felt helpless. Hu Jinyao shook his head at her. Su Qingsang felt helpless. She squeezed his hand worriedly, then turned and left. After she left, the greenhouse quieted down. Lu Tongjia had just vented her anger, so she was still upset. She was angry with Hu Jinyao. She was angry that her son didn't have any sense of propriety. She was angry that Su Qingsang had him in her hands. She was even more angry that she had lost all her prestige. She was not close to Hu Jinyao, so he wouldn't listen to her at all. All kinds of emotions were mixed together, but none of them could make her happy. Chapter 621. Mom? Hu Jinyao's tone was soft. Qingsang and I are not what you think. Qingsang is not what you think either. As for Uncle, he is not what you think either. Seeing that Lu Tongjia was still angry, Hu Jinyao didn't want to explain. However, he remembered that Lu Tongjia wasn't the one who poisoned him. At that time he was blinded by anger. Now that he looked back, there were many suspicious points. After all, no matter how much Lu Tongjia disliked him, she couldn't ignore the Hu family's reputation. Not to mention that there were so many guests and relatives there that day. She wouldn't have made a big deal out of it, and she wouldn't have allowed such a thing to happen. He was prejudiced and a little paranoid. Because of this, Hu Jinyao didn't look so angry. You have been poisoned by Su Qingsang. You are out of your mind. Lu Tongjia was very angry. She took a step forward. For the first time in so many years, she took the initiative to approach Hu Jinyao. Jinyao, I didn't stop you from doing anything you did before. If you wanted to find someone with a lower status, I wouldn't stop you. But Su Qingsang can't. She has a moral problem. Jinyao, I won't allow a person with a moral problem to be your wife and the future mistress of the Hu family. After all, not everyone could become the matriarch of the Hu family. Hu Jinyao knew that she was angry and disliked Su Qingsang. He didn't care about some things before, but now he couldn't ignore them. Mom, calm down and be objective. Hu Jinyao put his hands on Lu Tongjia's shoulders. His expression was calm. I am calm. I am calm. That's why I thought, I know how Uncle feels about Qingsang. His words interrupted Lu Tongjia. She stared at Hu Jinyao with her eyes wide open. What did you say? I know you like Qingsang. Hu Jinyao's expression was very calm. No, maybe it's not enough. It should be love. He loves Qingsang. Lu Tongjia's face turned pale. She stared at Hu Jinyao. But Qingsang doesn't know. How is that possible? Mom? Hu Jinyao had a feeling that he was back when he was a teenager. Lu Tongjia blamed him for all those things. Back then he didn't want to explain himself, but this time he wanted to. Uncle probably didn't know Qingsang's identity when he met her. Hu Jinyao didn't know what to say. There were some things he knew, but he didn't want to ruin his relationship with Su Qingsang with suspicion. Qingsang doesn't know what you're thinking. What you saw was just an accident. Accident? That time, I will find the person who drugged him. He would not allow such a person to exist in the Huo family. It wasn't too difficult to investigate these matters. But please believe me on one point. Qing Sang had absolutely no feelings for her uncle. I know they may often come across something that makes you uncomfortable. But in fact, I'm really glad that you had feelings for Su Qing Sang. Wu Jinyao. How could he say something like that? Was he still a man? Lu Tongjia's face turned green. Mom. Uncle saved Qing Sang's life. Hu Jinyao held her shoulder and tightened his grip. I almost lost Qing Sang. Almost. The last time I went to Sea City there was an earthquake. Qing Sang was trapped under the rubble. It was her uncle who saved her. Mom. I don't care what you think of uncle and I don't want to care what you think of Qing Sang. But I hope you understand that I'm very grateful to uncle. From the bottom of my heart. Lu Tongjia didn't know about these things and no one would tell her. She thought about the earthquake that killed hundreds of people, and that her son had also stayed there for many days. At that time she was very worried about Hu Jinyao and blamed Su Qing Sang in her heart. However, she didn't know that Su Qing Sang had almost died. I'm jealous that the person who appeared that day wasn't me. But I'm also glad that uncle was there that day. Otherwise I would have lost Qing Sang now. And that outcome was absolutely unacceptable to him. Mom. You didn't do it that day. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. Lu Tongjia couldn't keep up with her thoughts. She looked at Hu Jinyao. It was the first time in so many years that she had heard her son apologize. Her lips moved. She wanted to say something but she didn't know what to say. Her eyes suddenly turned red. Mom. I'm sorry. Hu Jinyao apologized very seriously. I shouldn't have misunderstood you. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. Lu Tongjia's eyes were not only red, but also a little sour and hot. She felt something coming out of her eyes. Mom, let's get over what happened in the past, okay? Qing Sang is a good girl. I hope you can put aside your prejudices and seriously accept her. You'll find that she's better than you think. Lu Tongjia didn't hear the second half of the sentence. She only heard the first sentence. Jinyao? Hu Jinyao turned his face slightly. When he looked at Lu Tongjia again, his expression was a little excited. At least he wasn't as calm as he appeared. It was Lu Tongjia's birthday today. She came to look for him yesterday. On his birthday, Lu Tongjia brought a cake to his apartment. Hu Jinyao thought about it and understood some things very clearly. It would be a lie to say that there was no barrier in his heart at all and that he didn't mind at all. However, Lu Tongjia was his mother, the person who gave birth to him. Especially after seeing how haggard Qi Shiwei had made herself because of her pregnancy, he sometimes couldn't help but wonder if Lu Tongjia had also had such a hard time when she was pregnant back then. Some things were in the past. It was hard to recall the past. Even if he couldn't be as close to Lu Tongjia as a normal mother and son, he really didn't want to be like an enemy to Lu Tongjia anymore. Hu Jinyao looked at Lu Tongjia and used a very soft voice to hide the trace of helplessness in the depths of his heart. Can I? Lu Tongjia's lips trembled. She blinked her eyes and tears flowed down her cheeks. At this moment she couldn't care less about Su Qing Sang. She just looked at Hu Jinyao in disbelief. He had scolded her viciously just now. He had clearly misunderstood her actions of taking the initiative to express goodwill several times. Now that he had put on such an attitude, Lu Tongjia couldn't accept it. For a moment she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. Jinyao. Perhaps because she couldn't believe it, Lu Tongjia's expression changed a few times. She hastily wiped away her tears and looked at Hu Jinyao with some uncertainty. Jinyao, is what you said true? Yes. It's all true, Mom. Hu Jinyao nodded. No matter what, he was willing to repair this mother-son relationship with Lu Tongjia. Lu Tongjia stood there motionlessly. She was a little emotional. She didn't think that it would be so easy to repair their mother-son relationship with Hu Jinyao, but at least this was a beginning. The great joy made her speechless. One moment she was a little surprised and the next moment she was a little regretful. Would he be angry at her for treating him like that before? Her emotions were complicated. At this moment she couldn't care less about Su Qing Sang. She was only thinking about what Hu Jinyao had said. He was willing to repair their relationship again. He was willing to start all over again. Although it was ridiculous to say that, after all, they were mother and son. But she was really excited, inexplicably excited. Her shoulders were slightly shaking. She lowered her head and couldn't find her voice. Hu Jinyao looked at her. He really didn't know that Lu Tongjia cared about him so much. Inexplicably he felt a little sad but he didn't say a word. Although the temperature outside was getting better, it was getting late. Hu Jinyao looked in the direction of the main house. Mom, let's go in. Lu Tongjia nodded. Seeing that Hu Jinyao was about to leave, she suddenly pulled his sleeve. Jinyao? Mom? Did you mean what you said just now? She asked a little nervously and didn't know what to do. Yes, he meant it. He also wanted to divert Lu Tongjia's attention. He wanted her to stop staring at Su Qingsang. Lu Tongjia smiled again and wiped the tears on her face. Good. Good. Very good. Very good. The words good were enough to explain Lu Tongjia's current mood. When they walked to the door of the greenhouse, Lu Tongjia suddenly stopped. Jinyao, I'm sorry. Hu Jinyao was stunned by her sudden apology. He turned his head and looked at her in confusion. I'm sorry, Lu Tongjia said again. She lowered her head and seemed to be a little embarrassed. I really wasn't a good mother. Jinyao. It was difficult to admit that she was wrong. Although Lu Tongjia wanted to reconcile with Hu Jinyao, she had made too many mistakes in the past 10 years. She was actually worried that Hu Jinyao wouldn't forgive her. Mom, it's okay. It's all in the past. He had grown up. He was no longer the boy who had nightmares at night and wanted his mother to comfort him. He was not the kind of person who would go against the heavens and the earth just because of a moment of anger and make everyone unhappy. Since it was all in the past, he would let it go. Jinyao? Mom, it's all in the past. Then let it go. Don't even think about it. Lu Tongjia's heart was in turmoil. She had a lot to say, but she couldn't say a word. Hu Jinyao walked outside and took the initiative to stand with Lu Tongjia. The main house was brightly lit. Hu Jinyao walked very slowly, taking care of Lu Tongjia's emotions. Mom? Go ahead. Qingsang is the person I chose. I know you have some prejudices against her. But she's really a very good woman. She's not what you think, so don't target her in the future. But Uncle saved her life and he's a relative of the Hua family. It's impossible for the two of them not to see each other in the future. I've already told Uncle about this. What happened before was an accident. Don't take it to heart. Accident? Lu Tongjia still felt wronged for her son. Do you know that they went to buy gifts together today? Lu Tongjia looked at Hu Jinyao with heartache in her eyes. Jinyao, I don't hate her. I just feel sorry for you. You protect her wholeheartedly, but she has ulterior motives. Do you know that Mom? Hu Jinyao had a headache. Wan Xianying and Uncle know each other. It's normal for Uncle and Qingsang to run into each other in his shop. Can't you think so much? Yes, it's normal to run into each other in Wan Xianying's shop. Is it normal to run into each other in our house? Lu Tongjia was so angry that she almost lost control. Her voice was a little louder than before. Mom, of course it's normal for Qingsang to go to Wan Xianying's shop to buy gifts for you. As for coming to our house, Grandpa is Uncle's uncle. It's normal for him to visit Grandpa. You're not going to blame Qingsang for Uncle's visit every time he comes, are you? Hu Jinyao didn't hear Qingsang talk about buying gifts, but he could roughly guess. It would be ridiculous to think that Su Qingsang and Zhang Yichen met each other because of a romantic relationship. He wasn't a person who couldn't tell right from wrong. But, Mom, Qingsang doesn't know about Uncle's feelings. She only sees him as an elder and a relative. If you continue like this, Qingsang might really find out. You have to know that Uncle saved Qingsang's life. If Qingsang finds out about Uncle's feelings, what will she do? Hu Jinyao's life, except for the disaster that happened to him when he was young, had been pretty much anything he wanted. However, he wasn't blindly arrogant. There was always someone better than him. There were people more powerful than him. He admitted that Zhang Yichen was one of the people who was stronger than him. Even if Zhang Yichen wasn't his rival in love or his uncle, Hu Jinyao still admired him. He had an indescribable appreciation for Zhang Yichen. He was honest and upright. Even if he liked Qingsang, he didn't do anything. His relationship with Zhang Yichen couldn't go back to how it used to be. But he didn't want to become enemies with him like this. More importantly, he didn't want Qingsang to feel embarrassed when she found out. She would feel uncomfortable when she was with Zhang Yichen in the future. It would be best to treat him as a relative and uncle. Lu Tongjia had a complicated expression on her face. She didn't like Qingsang, but Hu Jinyao's words seemed to make sense. If Qingsang didn't mean it, she kept saying it. Maybe Hu Jinyao was interested in her even if she didn't mean it. But, no buts. Mom, I trust Qingsang's character and Uncle's character. I trust Uncle more. If you want, you can do what you did in the past and in the future. Lu Tongjia finally stopped talking. The two of them walked to the gate and happened to meet Zhang Yichen, who was walking out. Cousin-in-law Jinyao. Uncle. Hu Jinyao greeted Zhang Yichen very calmly. Are you leaving? It's so late. You can leave tomorrow. No need. Zhang Yichen glanced at Hu Jingyao and shook his head. I have a mission in the army. I haven't seen you for a long time, so I came to see you. Okay, but it's so late. Be careful on the road, uncle. I know. Thank you. Zhang Yichen bowed, said goodbye to Lu Tongjia and then left. He got into the car. After starting the car, Zhang Yichen glanced at the Hua family's gate again. His eyes were gloomy. He thought of Su Qingsang, who came in from the garden, when he sent old Master Hua back to his room. She stood at the corner of the stairs and saw him coming downstairs. She called him. Uncle. Zhang Yichen stopped and looked at Su Qingsang, not knowing why she called him. Uncle, I haven't thanked you for what happened in Sea City last time. Zhang Yichen frowned and his expression was a little cold. You already thanked me at the hospital. That's different. Su Qingsang's eyes were clear, and there was a hidden meaning in them. It's not enough to thank you for saving my life. Zhang Yichen's expression became more and more serious, but Su Qingsang suddenly smiled. Uncle, I know what you're capable of and I'm afraid that with your status you won't need me. But I still have to say if you need me in the future, don't hesitate to ask. I'll do my best. Even if I can't do it, Jingyao will help me. After all, you're Jinyao's uncle and I'm Jinyao's wife. That will never change. Zhang Yichen looked at her face and seemed to understand. Su Qingsang turned her body to the side. Uncle, you're not an ordinary person, so you should have a lot of work to do. I won't see you out. Take care, uncle. He understood at that moment that she must have known. She knew what he was thinking and she also knew the deepest secret in his heart. Yes, she was such a smart woman. Even if he tried to restrain himself, how could she not see it? He didn't expect that she would directly ask him to leave after she found out. She would reveal that kind of information again. At that moment he was really crazy with jealousy. He was jealous of Hu Jinyao. Thinking of the tone of her last sentence, he suddenly smiled. Forget it. He had made 2 great contributions this time, and the higher-ups couldn't reward him anymore. After all, he was not old enough. If he continued to rise, it would be too fast. The higher-ups wanted him to go to the southwest to train the newly established secret force. Since that was the case, he would accept the task. He would have to stay there for at least 2 or 3 years. In another 2 or 3 years he might forget about these thoughts. Zhang Yichen took a deep look at the old house of the Hua family, then started the car and left. This time he wouldn't come back for a while. When Hu Jinyao returned to his room, Su Qingsang had just finished the video call with Li Qianxue. As soon as she went upstairs she received a video call from Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue really cared about her. Today was Lu Tongjia's birthday. She was always worried that if the gift wasn't to Lu Tongjia's liking, she would make things difficult for her poor daughter again. Su Qingsang had to repeatedly say that Lu Tongjia liked the bracelet very much. Although it wasn't a big party, the atmosphere was good, so she didn't have to worry. Who are you talking to? She seemed to have heard her talking before she entered the room. She came in and saw her lying on the bed with her phone in her hand, which confirmed her guess. What do you think? Mother-in-law. Smart. Su Qingsang sat up. My mother knew it was your mother's birthday, so she was very nervous. She was afraid that I didn't give her a good gift and made your mother unhappy. In fact, Lu Tongjia was indeed unhappy. Thinking of this, Su Qingsang felt a little embarrassed. She had wanted to repair the relationship between Hu Jinyao and Lu Tongjia, but she didn't expect that not only would it not be repaired, but it would also make Lu Tongjia so angry at her. I didn't expect that my flattery would backfire. I made your mother completely angry. That's not true. My mother is quite happy. Hu Jinyao walked to her side and sat down, but his words made Su Qingsang laugh. She turned her face to look at Hu Jinyao, with a bit of sarcasm in her eyes. Hu Jinyao, you're quite good at lying through your teeth, aren't you? What do you mean by lying through my teeth? Your mother is forcing me to divorce you, but I'm not going to marry you. Why is she still happy? Judging from Lu Tongjia's attitude just now, not to mention divorce her, she would even eat her heart raw. She asked you to divorce her, so you divorced her? Didn't you agree? It doesn't matter whether I agree or not. The important thing is whether you agree or not. As Su Qingsang said this, she straightened up and held Hu Jinyao's face with both hands. Her expression changed to a serious one. Or you've already promised your mother to divorce me, so your mother is happy? Hu Jinyao's reaction was to pull her hand down, put it to his lips, and bite it. Nonsense again. Su Qingsang pulled her hand back with force. She glared at Hu Jinyao and said, if I'm not talking nonsense, then please tell me, young Master Hua. What do you plan to do with me now? Hu Jinyao grabbed her hand again and held it in his arms. He leaned forward and kissed her on the lips. What do I plan to do with you? Hold hands for the rest of our lives and grow old together. What do you think? He said it in a joking tone, but he sounded very serious. Su Qingsang looked at him and her heart skipped a beat. However, thinking of Hu Jinyao's attitude just now, she didn't believe him. You want to spend the rest of your life with me? Will your mother agree? She was convinced by me. Hu Jinyao's words made Su Qingsang's eyes widen. She couldn't believe it. How did you convince her? She had always felt that making Lu Tongjia accept her was as difficult as climbing the Himalayas. Yes. Are you going to tell me or not? Su Qingsang couldn't help but pinch her waist. She was still trying to keep her in suspense. I'll tell you if you kiss me. Su Qingsang rolled her eyes at him, leaned over and kissed him on the lips. Hu Jinyao wasn't satisfied. He held her waist and deepened the kiss until Su Qingsang was out of breath. He didn't let her go until she was out of breath. I'll tell my mother. I'll tell her that you're the only wife I plan to marry in my life. If she insists on divorcing me, I won't marry anyone else in the future. I'll stay single until I'm old. If she's willing, I don't care. Why was this man so flippant? Su Qingsang looked at the expression on his face. She should have been moved, but she wanted to laugh at his flippant attitude. Will your mother agree if you say that? What else? Hu Jinyao looked at her and smiled. She can't really let me stay single forever, can she? Then our branch will have no descendants. Su Qingsang patted Hu Jinyao's shoulder hard. However, she reached out to hold his waist and rubbed her face against his chest. Your mother won't object to it anymore, will she? If I'm not wrong, she probably won't. Su Qingsang was relieved. In fact, she wasn't afraid that Lu Tongjia would object. However, if the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law didn't get along and were always on opposite sides, she would feel very embarrassed. More importantly, Hu Jinyao felt that way. It wasn't that he didn't love Lu Tongjia anymore, and she didn't want to face Lu Tongjia's sarcasm every time she returned to the Hu family. That's great, Hu Jinyao. That's great. Chapter 622. Hu Jinyao's hand gently stroked her back. He could feel the relief and disbelief in her voice. He gently patted her back. Don't worry. My mother knows. Even if Lu Tongjia really didn't want to believe it, it didn't matter. If they got along well, they could spend more time together. If they couldn't, they didn't have to stay together. As long as he was there, he would protect her. It was only a matter of time whether Lu Tongjia accepted it or not. Su Qingsang looked at him and smiled at him. She wasn't particularly worried about it, nor did she particularly care about it. She just wanted to have a good relationship with the Hu family instead of being hostile every time they met. Especially when that person was Hu Jinyao's mother. She didn't want that to happen. After saying what she wanted to say, she pushed his body and said, "Excuse me. I'm going to take a shower." When she was about to get up, Hu Jinyao suddenly held her hand. He turned over and pressed his body on top of hers. She was stunned, blinked and looked at Hu Jinyao. What's wrong? The bracelet you wore today is very beautiful. My mother likes it very much. Did you pick it out from Xianying? Yes. Alone? Xianying didn't accompany you? No. Su Qingsang shook her head, looked at Hu Jinyao and added, I met my uncle. He took me upstairs to pick it out. What a coincidence. Su Qingsang didn't like to hear his sarcastic words. Yes. What a coincidence. I made an appointment with him to pick out jewelry together. Then we did something else. As she spoke, she held Hu Jinyao's face with both hands. She raised her chin slightly, and the corners of her eyes were full of seduction. Guess what else we did? No matter what we did, I was jealous. Hu Jinyao grabbed her hand, leaned over, and bit her lips. Su Qingsang couldn't help but bite back in pain. As they nibbled, their lips were glued together. Hu Jinyao's kiss was a little rough, which showed that he was indeed unhappy. Su Qingsang didn't care. She did run into Zhang Yichen and they did pick out a gift for Lu Tongjia together. She did not think there was anything to hide. Even if Zhang Yichen had feelings for her, he was a relative of the Hu family and had saved her life. She couldn't treat him as a stranger or hate him. She believed that as long as she behaved properly, she would not be afraid of being criticized. Yes, she knew what Zhang Yichen was thinking, even if he had never shown it in front of her. But she still knew. During those few days in Sea City, she had a fever and was dizzy. He thought he was going to die a few times. As her consciousness blurred, a liquid flowed into her lips. She was very thirsty. He didn't care about anything else as he gulped down the food. At that time, she didn't know that she had drunk Zhang Yichen's blood. There was no light in the narrow space. Everything depended on feeling. She remembered a dazed moment of consciousness. She was thirsty and hungry. His lips were dry and cracked, and it was the most uncomfortable time. At that moment, the warm wrist was placed next to her lips. She only realized that something was wrong after taking 2 sips. That smell was not water. It was blood. She wanted to open her eyes, but even if she did, she couldn't see anything in the darkness. She heard Zhang Yichen's breathing and his heartbeat. After she knew what she was drinking, she couldn't drink anymore. At that moment, in a daze, she heard Zhang Yichen's words. Very softly. You have to live. You have to live. The man's voice was hoarse and he was weak from excessive blood loss. 2 simple words, but they contained too many emotions. Su Qingsang had a fever and was in a daze, but in the end she could only let herself pass out. She was not stupid. She could understand some things after connecting the dots. When she woke up in Sea City and heard that she was saved by Zhang Yichen, she understood everything. But she would rather not understand anything. She couldn't ask Zhang Yichen about it, nor could she show any extra attention to him. She was married and she had someone she loved. She could only let Zhang Yichen down. Her attitude today was not very good. It could even be said that she was quite cold-blooded. She treated her savior like that. She could be considered a heartless person. But she had no choice. Who was Zhang Yichen? He was a senior colonel and he was about to be promoted. He was also a relative of the Huo family. It was impossible and absolutely not allowed for there to be even the slightest hint of ambiguity between them. Even if it was just a thought, it wouldn't do. Her lips hurt again and she came back to her senses. Huo Jinyao was staring at her face. His eyes were burning and there was a hint of dissatisfaction in them. She suddenly smiled. When she smiled, Huo Jinyao became even angrier. Tieske, thinking about another man in front of me. Su Qingsang, you don't want to live, do you? Yes. Su Qingsang nodded and admitted it generously. Wrapping her arms around his neck, she leaned over and bit him on the lips. I want to die. She put her lips close to his ear and said very slowly, I want to die. Huo Jinyao's eyes darkened and his eyes turned red. He wanted to swallow this woman alive. At that moment, Su Qingsang rolled over and pressed him under her body. You want me to die? Su Qingsang purposely let out a sigh when she said the word die. At this moment, Su Qingsang was like a demon. Huo Jinyao believed that he was willing to turn into Tang Seng and let her squeeze him dry. Don't worry. Huo Jinyao pulled her waist into his arms. Tonight you're dead. Su Qingsang responded to him with a series of soft laughter. Those thoughts had already been tossed beyond the highest heavens at this moment. There was only her and him in front of them. They had each other. When she got up in the morning, old Master Hua and Hua Mingguang were still there. Su Qingsang and Huo Jinyao had gone too far last night. She almost couldn't get up. If she hadn't remembered that this was the Hua family at the last minute, she would have slept until noon. When she passed by Lu Tongjia, she found that although Lu Tongjia's face wasn't kind, it was at least gentle. Grandpa, Dad, Mom. Grandpa, Dad, Auntie. Su Qingsang also greeted them. However, the way she addressed them was a little different. Lu Tongjia frowned and looked at Su Qingsang in front of her. Her lips moved, but she wanted to say something, but she didn't. The weather was a little hot, and Su Qingsang was wearing a silk shirt today. Lu Tongjia sat diagonally to her side. Because the collar of Su Qingsang's shirt was a little big from her angle, she could see a kiss mark on Su Qingsang's collarbone. Her expression was a little strange. Halfway through the meal, Hua Mingguang glanced at Huo Jinyao. Hua Yifun's plan has been interrupted for a long time. We don't know how much manpower and material resources we invested in it. You, don't worry about that plan. I've already asked someone to start again. That was Qi Shiwei's painstaking effort. He wouldn't let anyone else touch it. Even if Huo Jinyao wanted to do it, he had to be personally involved. Hua Mingguang still felt a little uncomfortable when he thought of what Huo Jinyao had done. However, he didn't say anything else. Lu Tongjia tugged at Hua Mingguang's sleeve. She had made up her mind to repair her relationship with Huo Jinyao. She wouldn't let her son be unhappy. The meal was peaceful. Lu Tongjia saw the hickey on Su Qingsang's neck several times. She wanted to ask when they were planning to have children, but she couldn't bring herself to ask. Forget it, our relationship has just recovered. If there's anything else, we'll talk about it later. Huo Jinyao was about to leave after dinner. However, he seemed to have thought of something and went to the kitchen. If Lu Tongjia wasn't responsible for the incident on the Dragon Boat Festival, then who could it be? If the Hua family had such a person with evil intentions, it would definitely be an unpredictable bomb to the Hua family. He would not allow such a person to exist in his family. He called Auntie Zhou, Auntie Wang, Uncle Cheng, Xiao Xia and Xiao Jiang over. Hua Jinyao rarely interfered with family affairs. Lu Tongjia was in charge of most of them. Seeing him like this, they were all startled. The Hua family's house was their own place, and the surveillance cameras were only installed outside the house. Therefore, he could only ask these people about what happened on the day of the Dragon Boat Festival. Uncle Cheng came out first to explain the situation. Because the Hua family had dinner outside that day, the servants in the house didn't have to do anything. After dinner, the Hua family and the guests came back. The kitchen began to make soup to sober up. Then everyone was sent to their respective rooms. When Su Qingsang got into the car, she found that Hua Jinyao didn't look too good. What's wrong? Did he have a conflict with Lu Tongjia again? Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes and said coldly, I realized that I let Su Peijian go too easy on her by letting her go to jail for 5 years. Su Qingsang froze for a moment when she heard those words that came out of nowhere. Looking at Hua Jinyao, she thought of what Lu Tongjia had said the day before. She suddenly thought of something. The person who drugged uncle was Su Peijian? Hua Jinyao glanced at her. The look in his eyes confirmed everything. Is she crazy? Su Qingsang suddenly closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was a little unsure. No, she wanted to say that how would she know? However, she thought of something else. It wasn't the first day that Zhang Yichen had feelings for her. She didn't know, but others could see it clearly. Su Peijian was a smart person and she was deliberately targeting her. Of course, she wouldn't miss any opportunity. She didn't say the second half of the sentence and Hua Jinyao didn't care. He really didn't want Su Qingsang to know about Zhang Yichen's feelings. It was good that she didn't know. She's in jail now. Hua Jinyao's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. If you want her to go to jail for a few more years, it's not impossible. Those who bullied his woman had to pay the price. He didn't know about it before. If he knew, he wouldn't let Su Peijian go so easily. Speaking of which, Su Peijian hadn't done anything evil like murder or arson, but everything she had done had stepped on Hua Jinyao's bottom line. Chapter 623. Let Su Peijian stay in prison for a few more years? When Su Qingsang thought of this possibility, the first person she thought of was Xiang Kaiping. When Su Peijian came out, how old would Xiang Kaiping be? Don't touch her for now. Honey, I don't like your soft-heartedness. It's not that I'm soft-hearted. I want to see her. Ever since Su Peijian had been in prison, Su Qingsang hadn't visited Su Peijian. They were sisters. She thought that she might need to visit her once. It could be considered as a closure. I don't think there's anything to see. Hua Jinyao had an indescribable hatred for Su Peijian. If you want, it's easy to lock her up for the rest of her life. It was even easier to make Su Peijian live a life worse than death. It's okay. She's already locked up. What can she do to me? I'll go see her. After all, she and Su Peijian were sisters. Moreover, she and Xiang Kaiping and Su Peijian and Li Qianxue were related. Okay. Hua Jinyao squeezed her hand. No matter what, don't be soft-hearted. Just meet her once. Okay. Su Peijian was wearing an orange prison uniform. There was her number on her right chest. Her long hair had been cut short long ago. Her hair was short and her face was still bright, but it was a little more pale and haggard. In that pale and haggard there was also some unwillingness and resentment. It hadn't been long enough for her to melt away all the hostility in her body. But it was enough. A completely different person. This was the first time Su Qingsang had seen Su Peijian like this. Dashi. When Su Peijian saw Su Qingsang appear, she laughed. I didn't expect that you would be the one who came to see me on the visiting day. I'm really flattered. When she said the last 4 words, she deliberately paused. Su Qingsang didn't like Su Peijian like this. Sharp and mean. I thought that the 2 months you spent in prison would be enough for you to reflect on the mistakes you've made. Mistakes? What did I do wrong? As Su Peijian said this, the hatred in her eyes deepened. That woman gave me that plan. What's wrong with me using it? Hua Yifan was also a descendant of the Hua family. What was the difference between him and Hua Jinyao? What did I do wrong? Taking without asking is a thief. Later, Hua Jinyao told her about the case. She could roughly guess a few things. Su Peijian didn't steal it. He had given it to her, but he had asked her to give it to Hua Jinyao, not to use it herself. Ah. Su Peijian laughed. All right. Did you come here today to laugh at me? If that's the case, then I won't be accompanying you. She stood up and was about to leave when Su Qingsang suddenly said, "You drugged Hua Jinyao's uncle during the Dragon Boat Festival, didn't you?" Su Peijian stopped in her tracks. She suddenly moved closer to Su Qingsang, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Looks like you found out? What? Did Hua Jinyao suspect you? She doesn't want you anymore?" "We're fine." Su Qingsang didn't want to explain. Her relationship with Hua Jinyao wasn't something she could understand. "I'm here to ask you why." "Why?" Su Peijian laughed wildly. "Things have come to this and you're asking me why?" She slapped her hands hard on the table in front of her. The loud noise attracted the scolding of the prison guard next to her. 7587. Behave yourself. Su Qingsang, it's all your fault that I'm in this state. You're asking me why? If it weren't for you, would I be as miserable as I am today? All of this is your fault. Su Qingsang. Su Peijian's actions caused the prison guard to scold her again. She hid the hatred on her face and her voice was extremely cold. "Su Qingsang, you wanted to see me make a fool of myself. You've seen it. Please forgive me for not being able to accompany you anymore." Su Qingsang didn't want to say more to Su Peijian, but when she saw her and thought of the 12 years she had been high-spirited, she couldn't tell how she felt. "It's your own fault that you're in this state." She took a deep breath to calm herself down. She looked at Su Peijian, who had already stood up and was looking at her. Through the glass, her expression was indifferent and her eyes were clear. Facing the hatred in Su Peijian's eyes, she was surprisingly calm. "Su Peijian, you're in this state. You sent yourself to such a place because of yourself. Yes. You feel that you've lost the protection of the Su family. You feel that you're no longer the daughter of the Li family. You can't stand such a difference. You feel that I've taken everything away from you. But have you ever thought that it's because you're selfish? Su Peijian, because you're selfish, because you only want to monopolize it but you're not willing to share it. Because you don't want the person who gets everything to be me. That's why you're so intense and extreme." Su Peijian couldn't help but sneer. "Yes, I'm not willing. Why should I be willing? To let you press on top of me? Have I ever pressed on top of you? Su Peijian, after the fact that we exchanged identities is revealed, if you're willing to take a step back. Even one step. As long as you're willing to share, as long as you're willing to accept me, we can still be a family. Whether it's grandpa or mom, they've raised you for so many years. They won't really ignore you. But how did you do it? What did you do? Do you want me to remind you? Okay. Even if mom and grandpa don't want you anymore, what about auntie? If there was anyone Su Qingsang couldn't bear, it would be Xiang Kaiping. She brought you to Rong City and gave you a new start. She gave you a chance to start over. She's so good to you. What have you done to her? You don't like her. You've broken her heart time and time again. Su Peijian, who did you let down? You don't like auntie and you resent grandpa and mom. You drugged me and you even got Qiu Yanba to destroy me? You even drugged uncle? You wanted to destroy me, destroy Jinyao. Su Peijian, you've done so many things. Do you think Jinyao's imprisonment was unjust? It was rare for Su Qingsang to be so agitated, but seeing Su Peijian being so stubborn, she was very angry. Do you know that after your accident, Andy came to me? Su Peijian was stunned for a moment. She raised her head and looked at Su Qingsang. Andy came to beg me and then she went to beg Jinyao. Originally, if you just took the plan, Jinyao wouldn't do anything to you. But you came up with such a vicious way to deal with me in Lin City. Jinyao couldn't just do nothing. I can't be a saint. I can pretend that nothing happened. But do you know that Auntie is innocent? She's so old, but she still came out to beg for help for you. You probably didn't see that Auntie's hair is mostly white, right? Su Peijian's face was a little stiff. That woman's hair was white? She didn't know. Xiang Kaiping came to visit her in prison, but she refused to see her. If it weren't for Su Qingsang's current identity as the young mistress of the Hua family, she wouldn't have wanted to see her when the prison guards brought her out. She didn't want to see anyone. You hate the heavens, hate the earth, hate everyone in this world. Have you ever thought about how many people in this world love you? If you weren't so extreme, you might have married Hua Yifan by now. No matter how bad Hua Yifan is, he's still the vice president of Tianyu Group. If you were willing to take a step back and get along with me, even if we couldn't be as close as sisters, at least we wouldn't be like enemies like we are now. You ignore the good intentions of others. You don't use your advantages. All you think about is hatred and revenge. Is this my fault? Do you know that before you drugged me, Grandpa told Mom that if you were willing to come back, the door of the Su family would always be open for you? Yusin came to me and said that he wanted to help you. Su Peijian, you're also someone who had a good hand. Why did you ruin your good hand? Su Peijian's body sat down. She sat there motionless, her expression a little stiff. Do you know that there are some people in this world who are 1,000 times, 10,000 times more miserable than you? But not everyone wants to take revenge, right? She thought of Qi Shiwei. In terms of misery, Qi Shiwei was much more miserable than Su Peijian. She shook her head. There were some things that had to be said. Everyone was smart, so there was no point in saying any more. Su Peijian. Your sentence isn't long. It's only 5 years. If you behave well, you might be able to get out in less than 3 years. Are you sure that you want to continue spending the rest of your life in hatred, jealousy, and endless revenge against others? You have to know that even if you come out after 5 years in prison, you're only 30 years old. Su Peijian, I've said everything I wanted to say. After today, I won't come to see you again. If you come out in a few years and are willing to turn over a new leaf, I believe that both Dad and Andy will still recognize you as their daughter. If you're not willing, I'll still say the same thing. No matter what you want to do, I'm not afraid of you. I'll accompany you to the end. Su Qingsang rarely spoke so much. She felt a little dry. She stood up and took one last look at Su Peijian. Su Peijian, you're on your own. Su Qingsang picked up her bag and turned to leave. When she got into her car, her emotions had completely calmed down. Thinking about Su Peijian's appearance just now, she took out her phone and called Su Qinghui. Qingsang? Since the last time Su Qinghui and Su Qingsang had a conflict because of Su Peijian, Su Qinghui hadn't contacted Su Qingsang. He called Su Qingsang several times but she didn't answer. He knew that she still blamed him for being biased towards Su Peijian for no reason. However, some things had become a habit of his in more than 12 years of ignorance. He tried to change slowly in the future, but Su Qingsang seemed to not want to give him a chance, just like Li Qianxue. Su Qinghui was inexplicably excited when he received Su Qingsang's call. Qingsang, you called me? Su Qingsang could hear his excitement, and her heart was a little bitter. She shook her head and her voice was very soft. Dad, I called to tell you that something happened to Su Peijian. She's now in Rong City prison. What? If you have time, come and see her. No, how did something happen to her? Isn't she in Lin City? No, I haven't seen her for a long time. Yushi. If there's anything, wait until you come to Rong City. It's not clear on the phone. But I think you'll want to see her and talk to her. Perhaps with the care and companionship of her family, Su Peijian would be less hostile and more peaceful. Qingsang, can you say something first? Dad, you'll know when you come. I still have something to do, so I'll hang up first. After saying this, Su Qingsang hung up the phone. She didn't hate Su Qinghui, but she really couldn't help but mind him thinking of her as a bad person as soon as something happened to her. She also knew that she couldn't ignore Su Qinghui for the rest of her life. But she had to give her some time to slowly digest the fact that she would never be able to be as close as father and daughter to Su Qinghui in this life. She put down the phone and was about to start the car to leave, but she found that a person got out of a taxi on the opposite road. The somewhat old, slightly haggard face was impressively Xiang Kaiping. She saw Xiang Kaiping and Xiang Kaiping also saw her. Looking at the prison gate behind her, Xiang Kaiping didn't expect Su Qingsang to come to see Su Peijian. This really surprised her. Today was the once-a-month prison visit day. She came very early. The last time she came to see Su Peijian didn't want to see her. If she missed it today, it would be next month. Suddenly seeing Su Qingsang, she stood there and didn't move. Their eyes met. Even across the road, Su Qingsang could see Xiang Caiping's face, which had aged more than 10 years. Her heart trembled. Su Qingsang quickly got out of the car and ran in Xiang Caiping's direction. Auntie? You're here to see Peijian? She was a little unconfident. After all, her daughter was sent to prison by Hua Jinyao. Yes. Strangely, there was no resentment or dissatisfaction in Xiang Caiping's eyes. Today is prison visit day. Su Qingsang looked at the taxi that had already left. Auntie, hurry up and go. I'll wait for you here. I'll send you back later. Xiang Caiping's lips moved. She wanted to refuse, but in the end she didn't. She was old and didn't understand the tricks of young people. The last time she took a taxi, the driver left. She walked for more than half an hour before she found the bus stop. Sorry to trouble you. Su Qingsang shook her head. Auntie, don't stand on ceremony. Hurry up and go. Xiang Kaiping turned around and walked towards the prison gate. Thinking of the last time she came, she turned back and glanced at Su Qingsang. You came to see her. Have you seen her? Yes. She saw you? Yes. At first she didn't want to see her, but since Su Qingsang was here she was naturally prepared. The Hua family had a good relationship with all parties in Rong City. If there was any trouble it would only be a phone call. Hearing this, Xiang Caiping's expression relaxed a little. If Su Peijian was willing to see Su Qingsang, did it mean that she was willing to see her? Su Qingsang waited for Xiang Caiping in the car for half an hour. She finally came out. Her complexion was better than when she went in. She quickly started the car and parked the car beside Xiang Caiping. "Andy, get in the car." Xiang Caiping's eyes were red as if she had cried. Su Qingsang wanted to ask but in the end she couldn't. After she fastened her seat belt and started the car, Xiang Caiping wiped her tears away. "You've lost weight and look haggard." Su Qingsang knew that she was talking about Su Peijian. "It's okay. When she comes out take good care of yourself. You'll get better." "Yes." Xiang Caiping smiled bitterly. "I don't know if I'll be able to live until she comes out." "Auntie, don't say that. You'll live to a ripe old age." "I don't expect to live to a ripe old age. If I can live until she comes out, I'll persuade her to live a good life and know her place. I'll find a man and have a child. If I can see that day I'll be able to die in peace." Su Qingsang didn't know how to respond. She had said what she had said today, but she really didn't know if Su Peijian would change in 5 years. She didn't speak and Xiang Caiping didn't want her to. The prison was far away. It was in the suburbs. It would take more than 2 hours to drive back. She looked out of the window and almost said to herself, "She's a good child. I just lost my mind for a moment. I regret it. It's all my fault. Of course, I shouldn't have abandoned her. I shouldn't have thought that Su Qinghui would teach her well. It's all my fault." Xiang Caiping nagged for a long time. Sometimes Su Qingsang would respond, and sometimes she would just listen to Xiang Caiping. Just like that they arrived at the small villa where Xiang Caiping lived. The car stopped. After more than 2 hours in the car, Xiang Caiping was obviously tired. She didn't rush to get out of the car. Instead, she glanced at Su Qingsang. "Qingsang. Thank you." "You're welcome, Auntie. You're a good child." Xiang Caiping's eyes were a little red. "Jinyao is lucky to marry you." "Auntie?" "It's okay. You can go. I'm going back." Xiang Caiping got out of the car. She was in a much better mood when she saw her daughter. However, that silhouette still looked lonely, old, and had a kind of fragility that no one could look at directly. "What's wrong?" Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang, who had been silent since she got home. He reached out and pulled her into his arms, letting her sit on his lap. "You're in a bad mood? What happened? About the hospital?" Su Qingsang shook her head. "About Su Peijian? You went to see her? What did she say?" Hua Jinyao really hated Su Peijian to the extreme. "Nothing." Su Qingsang put her arms around his waist and said in a low voice, "I just met Auntie. Jinyao, do you know? I saw Auntie today and realized that she's more than 10 years older. She's about the same age as my mother." But Su Qingsang didn't finish her sentence. Hua Jinyao understood what she meant. "You're not asking me to get Su Peijian out, are you?" "Absolutely not. No." Su Qingsang shook her head. She sat up straight and looked at Hua Jinyao. She had been thinking about this all day. In fact, she wasn't sure if Hua Jinyao would agree. Chapter 624. He didn't speak and the living room was very quiet for a while. It was a little hot, and Su Qingsang was a little sweaty in Hua Jinyao's arms. She put her hands on Hua Jinyao's shoulders. This idea was the result of Su Qingsang's careful consideration today. "I know you might be unhappy, but Auntie is alone. Even with a nanny, there might be some things that can't be taken care of. Also, Su Peijian will be locked up in prison for 4 to 5 years. When she comes out, I don't know what the situation will be. If we bring Auntie to live with us, at least she won't be so lonely. What do you think?" Hua Jinyao looked at her. "Have you decided?" "Not really. I'm asking you what you think. If you don't come, I won't go to pick her up. But I think even if Auntie comes, we won't have any problems getting along. You know, Auntie is a good person. She takes good care of us in Lin City. I really don't want to see her alone." If they hadn't been together for the past few months, Su Qingsang would have sighed at most. But after those months and what Xiang Caiping had done for her, she couldn't bear to see her alone. She didn't want to see her in such a miserable and lonely old age. Hua Jinyao held her hand and wrapped it in his palm. Her hand was very slender, not the kind of hand that was made of flesh. Because it was often disinfected during surgery, it was transparent and white. His fingertips slid across her palm bit by bit, looking at the lines on it. Honey, look at this emotional line. It's too deep and too long. At first glance, you can tell that she's a person who values relationships. Su Qingsang listened to his nonsense, but she couldn't laugh. How come I didn't know that you can tell fortunes? Alright. If you want to say that I'm indecisive, just say it, but I really don't want to see Andy like this. Okay. Hua Jinyao nodded, held her hand, and stared at Su Qingsang's face. Just when she thought that he would agree, he suddenly became serious. You want Andy to move in with us? Yes. Have you thought that she will agree? Well? Su Qingsang thought of Xiang Caiping's stubborn side. I will persuade her. Although Xiang Caiping had a nanny at home now, the nanny would come home. Even if he was by her side 24/7, that feeling wasn't something that could be compared to being with a relative or family member. All right. You can convince her, but what about me? You? Su Peijian is her daughter. Who sent Su Peijian to prison? Even if Xiang Caiping didn't hate Su Peijian, she couldn't possibly not hold a grudge against her, right? Su Qingsang was speechless. Her voice weakened. Maybe Andy doesn't blame you. Hua Jinyao continued, it's not my fault. But I sent her daughter to prison. It's a fact that I ignored her when she came to me. Su Qingsang understood what he meant, but she said, I'm not that kind of person. She's not, but Su Peijian is. Hua Jinyao knew that Su Qingsang meant well, but some people really didn't deserve to be treated well. After Su Peijian gets out of prison, do you think she'll thank you for taking care of her mother? Or does she hate you for snatching away her only family, her only motherly love? I didn't. You didn't, but she'll think you did. Hua Jinyao didn't mind giving her a good lesson. Do you know why Su Peijian has become what she is today? She has a paranoid personality, that kind of person. To put it bluntly, you can't afford to offend her. She will only believe what she has already decided. As for anything else, she doesn't care. Qingsang, if you really care about Auntie, visit her more often when you're free. I believe she will be very happy. But if you want to bring her to live with you, I don't think it's appropriate. Su Qingsang didn't say anything, but her face darkened. Hua Jinyao's analysis was reasonable, but Jinyao will only take care of her for a few years? When Su Peijian gets out of prison, we'll return Auntie to her. Besides, you said that we don't know what will happen to her when she gets out. In that case, why don't we let Auntie enjoy the warmth of a family first? Hua Jinyao knew that she was stubborn, but he didn't expect her to be so stubborn. Qingsang, you have to let her enjoy the warmth of a family. What about your mother? Seeing that she didn't react for a while, Hua Jinyao didn't mind clarifying. Your mother, Ms. Li Qianxue, hates two people in her life. There are two people I hate the most in my life. One is your father. Now that they are divorced, the other is Auntie. Then Mrs. Hua, when you bring Auntie to take care of and give her the warmth of a family, where do you put your mother? Su Qingsang looked at him blankly. Her expression was a little silly and a little dazed. Li Qianxue? All right, she had actually forgotten about Li Qianxue. Hua Jinyao shook his head with a smile and reached out to gently flick her forehead. But, no buts. Hua Jinyao's voice was very serious. Qingsang, sometimes life is such a cruel multiple-choice question. It's either one or two. There's no three. Su Qingsang's lips opened and closed and opened again. She thought of the back of Xiang Caiping when she got out of the car today, and the way she staggered into the prison gate. She was actually very upset. But Hua Jinyao was right about one thing. Li Qianxue and Xiang Caiping couldn't coexist. Li Qianxue wasn't in Rong City now. If she were in Rong City and knew that she was going to take care of Xiang Caiping, she would definitely object. This action would definitely affect the mother-daughter relationship between her and Li Qianxue. Su Qingsang said the word I, and lowered her head. Hua Jinyao understood her feelings. Xiang Caiping was also very good to him, and he was also very willing to take care of her. However, there was no need to cause unnecessary trouble. He wasn't afraid of trouble, but he didn't want Su Qingsang to face it. I didn't think that much. I'm not saying that I don't respect my mother. Su Qingsang buried her head in his chest. Her voice was very soft. If he hadn't been so close, he would have almost missed it. I just feel sorry for Auntie. Those few months, Auntie was really good to her. Do you still remember? She knitted a sweater for me. That sweater is still in the closet upstairs. She made local home-cooked dishes for me in Lin City, and every day she would think of ways to be good to me. I know that if you want to say that she treated me like her daughter, that's because she treated me like her daughter. These good things were originally for Su Peijian. But Hua Jinyao, I couldn't help it. I couldn't treat her like a stranger. Not to mention that she was hit by a car in order to buy a piece jade for me. She almost died and was almost paralyzed. Her voice was broken. She raised her head to look at Hu Jingyao with tears in her eyes. I just feel sorry for her. Her man was stolen, and because of a moment of anger, she abandoned her daughter and ran away. It wasn't easy for her to recognize the daughter, but she was a fake. When she recognized the real daughter, she went to prison. If it were someone else with a weaker mind, they might have committed suicide. I know, but you can't offend your own mother for someone else's mother, right? Hu Jingyao wrapped her body in his arms and gently patted her back. Qingsang, you've been with Andy for a few months and you have feelings for her. I understand that you want to take care of her. But there are some things in this world that can't be helped. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Su Qingsang didn't speak. She knew. If she wanted to take care of a lonely old man today, maybe Li Qinshua wouldn't have any objections. But that person was Xiang Kaiping, so she couldn't. But what did it have to do with Xiang Kaiping? All right, don't think about it. Hu Jingyao held her face with both hands and made her look at him. I don't think Auntie will be willing to live with us. Xiang Kaiping was a very proud person. The worse her situation was, the more unwilling she would be to accept help from others. After all, who would want to bear the pity of others? Su Qingsang knew that, but she felt sad. Hu Jingyao saw that she was so sad, so he leaned over and kissed her on the lips. Honey, why don't we go out and play? Go out and play? Where? She wasn't in the mood at all. You see, we didn't have a honeymoon when we got married. Why don't we find a place to have fun for a few days? Su Qingsang glanced at Hu Jingyao and suddenly smiled. Jingyao, don't be like this. I'll adjust myself. She buried her face in his chest and put her arms around his waist. Hu Jingyao, thank you. Actually, it's good to go out for a walk. It doesn't have to be for relaxation. We can also go out and play. How about we take it as a honeymoon? Su Qingsang rubbed her face against his chest. Are you kidding me? You've been very busy recently. Can you really leave your company? Hu Jingyao frowned and thought of the ongoing case. He really didn't have time. Next month. Hu Jingyao thought of something. Next month, I'm going to Italy to talk about a contract. Will you go with me? Let's talk about it then. I still have to take the exam. Recently, the hospital had been very busy. She had an exam and a paper to write. Recently, because of these things, a lot of progress had been delayed. Didn't you say that the exam is at the end of the month? After you finish the exam, we can go at the beginning of next month. Just take it as a relaxation. How about it? Okay. Su Qingsang couldn't find a reason to refuse. She couldn't refuse his kindness, so she felt a lot better. I haven't been to Italy yet. Then it's settled. We can also have fun in Europe for a few days. Okay, I'll listen to you. Su Qinghui sat across from Su Qingsang. The father and daughter hadn't seen each other for a few months, but they didn't say anything to each other. Su Qingsang was expressionless. Su Qinghui looked at her with a guilty expression. After getting off the plane, he went to Su Qingsang's hospital almost without rest. He was lucky that Su Qingsang just got off work. She didn't bring Su Qinghui home, but to a nearby hotel. They sat in a corner of the hotel's magnificent restaurant. The whispers of other guests at the other tables didn't affect their conversation at all. Her phone rang. Su Qingsang glanced at Su Qinghui and picked up the phone. Hu Jingyao had a gathering with his childhood friends tonight. He asked her if she wanted to go. No need. I have something to do. Junxing is back. It's rare for him to come back. If you're not particularly busy, I'll come pick you up. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft. You can play with them. My dad is here. Hu Jingyao understood. Okay, you go ahead. I'll come to see you later. Okay. After hanging up the phone, Su Qingsang looked at Su Qinghui in front of her. Time really treated this man well. He was already middle-aged, but he still looked elegant and stylish. His temperament didn't look like a businessman at all. People would believe that he was a professor at some university. I know you're here to know about Su Peixian. I'll tell you. Qingsang. Su Qinghui interrupted her and took out a box from his pocket. This is a gift I bought for you when I went to France last time. For you. Su Qingsang looked at the box. She wasn't unfamiliar with the logo on it. She wasn't in a hurry to take it. Instead, she looked at Su Qinghui. Su Peixian, she asked for it. If you want to plead for her or want Hu Jingyao to let her off, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to say anything. It was rare for her to be so unyielding in front of Su Qinghui. Half of it was because she really hated what Su Peixian had done, and the other half was because she was also a little uncomfortable with Su Qinghui's previous actions. Su Qinghui's expression was a little awkward. He rarely showed such a side in front of his children. It's not that, Qing sang. I didn't mean to plead for Peijin. I just saw this gift when I went to France last time and thought it was very suitable for you. His voice was very soft. Ever since the two daughters switched back, whether it was Li Qianxue or Su Qingsang, he had always been a little less confident. His sincere eyes didn't seem to be fake. The sincerity in his eyes didn't seem to be fake. Su Qingsang felt a little awkward and took the small box. Thank you, Dad. You're welcome. Su Qinghui called the waiter and began to order. He then asked Su Qingsang what she liked to eat. Su Qingsang had been here with Hu Jinyao before, so she randomly ordered a dish. Su Qinghui didn't force her. The two of them ordered 4 dishes and a soup. After the waiter left, he looked at Su Qingsang with a faintly concerned expression. How have you been recently? Has Hu Jinyao been treating you well? Very well. Although the relationship between Hu Jinyao and Lu Tongjia couldn't be built overnight, it was obvious that they had become much closer recently. They didn't go back to the old mansion. Occasionally, Lu Tongjia would come over for dinner. That's good, that's good. After saying this, Su Qinghui couldn't find anything else to say. He picked up the teacup in front of him and poured a cup of tea for himself and a cup for Su Qingsang. He didn't speak. Su Qingsang had been estranged from him for a long time. She couldn't find anything to say, so she could only speak first. That Su Peijin is now serving her sentence in Rong City Prison. Her crime is theft of trade secrets. Before Qing sang. I really just wanted to see you. Since Peijin went to prison, she must have done something wrong. I know everything. He didn't say what he knew, but some words were already his attitude. Su Qingsang was stunned for a moment. Dad, you should listen to it. In Su Qinghui's heart, Su Peijin was his most beloved daughter. Now that things had become like this, he should know. He briefly told her what Su Peijin had done. She drugged Zhang Yichen in Rong City, and then she went to Lin City and drugged her. Later, she stole Hu Jinyao's plan. Letting her go to prison for a few years is a big punishment for her. But I don't think Hu Jinyao and I did anything wrong. Su Qinghui sat there and didn't say anything. In fact, he was also quite shocked. Is she crazy? I don't know. Su Qingsang shook her head and said softly, Dad, it's good that you're here. Go see her. Talk to her. Comfort her. Su Qinghui's expression was complicated. Finally, he nodded and said, okay. They didn't say anything during the meal. After the meal, Su Qingsang knew that normally she should let Su Qinghui stay at her house. There was a guest room anyway, but she didn't want to. Dad, let me book a room for you. That was why she had brought Su Qinghui to this hotel for a meal. It's okay. I'll book it myself. Su Qinghui glanced at Su Qingsang with a hint of disappointment in his eyes. Su Qingsang saw it, but she didn't intend to invite him. She seemed to understand Hu Jinyao's feelings before. After being hurt by his loved ones for too long, sometimes it really wasn't easy to accept them. Su Qinghui booked a room. Su Qingsang planned to send him back to his room and leave. Dad, rest early. If there's nothing else, I'll go back first. Su Qinghui's lips moved. He wanted Su Qingsang to stay for a while. He wanted to talk to her. However, he couldn't find a position. Su Qingsang's phone rang at this moment. Li Qianxue was sending a video call request. At this time every day, as long as it was convenient for Su Qingsang, she would definitely video call Li Qianxue. Looking at Su Qinghui now, she was a little hesitant, but she still picked up. Mom? As soon as she called her mom, she immediately saw Su Qinghui's eyes suddenly light up. He stared at her phone with a fervent gaze. Su Qingsang slightly turned her body so that Li Qianxue, who was on the other side of the video call, wouldn't see any clues. Qingsang. Li Qianxue noticed at a glance that Su Qingsang wasn't at home or in the hospital. Are you outside? Is it convenient for you to talk? I'm outside. I have something to do. I'll go back later. Su Qingsang noticed that Su Qinghui took a step towards her. She subconsciously took half a step back. Mom, are you still working overtime? Li Qianxue was in her office. It was obvious that she was still working overtime. There's still a little work to be done. I'll go back later. Don't work too late. Su Qingsang knew that Li Qianxue had recently been working on a new project and was actually very busy. Mom, if you're busy, I'll talk to you later. It's okay. Li Qianxue heard a knock on the door before she could hang up. Before she could hang up the phone, the person outside had already come in. I knew it. You're working overtime again. It was a clear male voice that sounded very young. It was too late for Li Qianxue to turn off the video call. The voice had already come in. I brought you dinner. Come eat before you work. Who let you in? I knocked on the door. You knocked on the door and I didn't allow you to come in. Li Qianxue stood up and was about to turn off the video call when Su Qingsang saw the man approaching. Get out. Do you hear me? I'm already in and I'm here to bring you dinner. You don't have to be so cold, do you? Su Qingsang heard the sound of approaching voices. Soon she saw a figure. Is this your daughter? She doesn't look like you. Hello, I'm you. It was a face that looked quite young and quite handsome. She froze for a moment. Before she could speak, Li Qianxue had already hung up the call. Su Qingsang wanted to ask who that person was, but she didn't say anything. But now she didn't have the chance. The man looked to be in his early 30s. His voice was so casual when he spoke to Li Qianxue. Su Qingsang blinked and thought of an almost impossible thing. That man, could he be her mother's suitor? If that was the case, then it was really too. From the corner of her eye she saw Su Qinghui, who was still standing in front of her. Su Qingsang restrained the emotions on her face, because she found that Su Qinghui's expression was very ugly. Dad. No matter how wrong the other party was, he was still her father. Su Qingsang took a step forward with concern. Are you okay? Su Qinghui came back to his senses and shook his head stiffly. Dad. I'm fine. Su Qinghui's voice was a little obscure. Go back and rest. It's getting late. Then you? Su Qinghui didn't seem to want to say more. Su Qingsang had nothing to say to him anyway. After saying a few words of concern, she left. Before leaving, she thought of Su Qinghui's pale and shocked face when he heard the man's voice. She suddenly felt that Su Qinghui seemed to be a little pitiful. When she got home, Hu Jingyao hadn't come back yet. She looked at the time. If Li Junxing came back, the group's party wouldn't end so early. She sent a video call request to Li Qianxue. However, the other party rejected it. She had to call instead. It rang for a long time. This time, Li Qianxue finally picked up. Qingsang. Li Qianxue's voice sounded a little strange. Su Qingsang couldn't help but be concerned. Mom? Are you okay? I'm fine. What could happen to me? I heard that you haven't eaten yet. I've eaten. I've already eaten. Li Qianxue spoke quickly, but Su Qingsang remembered that the man said he would bring her food. Would she be eating the food that the man sent her? Qingsang, I still have some documents to read. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Li Qianxue's voice was a little anxious. The man in front of her had already started to clean up the lunchbox on the table. The time it took for Su Qingsang to return home from the hotel was just enough for Li Qianxue to finish dinner. The man smiled at Li Qianxue arrogantly. His mouth moved as if he was about to speak. Li Qianxue glared at the man. Qingsang, I'll hang up first. Oh, okay. Su Qingsang hung up the phone. She was sure of two things. First, that man was most likely still in Li Qianxue's office. Second, that man and Li Qianxue were probably not ordinary people. It could also be Li Qianxue's suitor, or it could be a man that Li Qianxue admired. However, she was not in a hurry. Whether Li Qianxue had a new suitor or Li Qianxue fell in love with someone else, she believed that with her age and experience she would know what she wanted. She also hoped that Li Qianxue could find happiness again. However, thinking of Su Qinghui's pale face today, Su Qingsang couldn't bear it. Chapter 625. As soon as Hu Jingyao ended the call with Su Qingsang, he met the eyes of the group of people in the private room. TSK. It's really different after getting married. Tang Mohan put one hand on Hu Jingyao's shoulder and poured him a glass of wine with the other hand. You need to report when you come out to play. It was just that they did not have a meal together, but they still stuck to each other for so long. Jingyao, you've really opened my eyes. Isn't that so? Cheng Xianyun chimed in. Look at her glowing face. TSK, as expected, she's different after being nourished by love. Go away. Hu Jingyao smiled and picked up the wine in front of him. Are you jealous? Go get married too. We are not like you, willing to give up a forest for a tree. Be careful, the forest will be gone and the trees will be gone. Hu Jingyao's words made the others hiss. Only Wan Xianying looked quite upset. Brother Hua, why are you so lucky? Sister-in-law got together with you so easily. Why is sister-in-law's friend so hard to deal with? He was naturally talking about Shi Mengwan. He had traveled thousands of miles to pursue his wife, and he had even gone to France. Shi Mengwan didn't react. Brother, let me give you a piece of advice. Forget about Shi Mengwan. There were many good girls in Rong City. Don't hang yourself on her tree. Hu Jingyao and Su Qingsang were together every day, and Su Qingsang would video call Shi Mengwan from time to time. He more or less knew that Shi Mengwan had someone in her heart. How am I bad? Wan Xianying stood up as he spoke and made Schwarzenegger's signature gesture. Tell me I have a good figure, a good family background, and a good look. How am I not good enough for her? Last month he casually went to gamble on a few stones and earned tens of millions. He usually looked sloppy, but everyone in the industry knew that it was just a facade. It has nothing to do with whether she's worthy or not. Hu Jingyao sincerely suggested. I heard from Qingsang that she has someone else in her heart. Don't even think about it. Who is it? Can he beat me? Wan Xianying was unconvinced. Let him come out and fight one-on-one. Forget it. Li Junxing, who had been silent all this while, spoke up. How do you really like her? It was all because of unwillingness. If she really lets you chase after her, you might lose interest in her immediately. Junxing. That's not nice of you. Wan Xianying didn't deny it. It was indeed very difficult for Shi Mengwan to pursue him. Who said that I won't cherish him once I get him? Maybe it's because he's had a hard time chasing her, so he's even more interested? Who would believe you? Li Junxing laughed and scolded, but now that you mention it, I'm a little interested. I want to know what a woman who can make my young master Wan so worried looks like. Aren't you in Lin City? You should have seen it before, right? No. He was very busy and he cherished his feathers. He rarely went out to socialize. He had seen Su Qingsang many times, but he had never seen Su Qingsang's friends. If you see her, you might like her too. You think too much. Hu Jingyao answered for Li Junxing. If you're a playboy, then Junxing is a cold robot. The only thing he loves the most is his future. Everyone in the private room laughed. Who wouldn't agree? Li Junxing was already the mayor of a city at such a young age. His results in Lin City for more than a year were quite good. It was estimated that he would be promoted when his next term was up. Women. Li Junxing smiled. He didn't deny it. However, Hu Jingyao's matter reminded him of another thing. Halfway through the wine, the others ran over to join in the fun. Li Junxing sat next to Hu Jingyao. Jingyao, you'll know about this sooner or later. I think your great-uncle's family should have heard about it first. But I still decided to let you know. What? I went to City A on a business trip last time. There was a large-scale investment project there. Many local companies wanted to take it, but the plate was too big for them to handle. I think your company can give it a try. City A? Yes. Li Junxing briefly explained the situation. The preliminary estimate is that the profit is more than 1 billion. How about it? Do you do it or not? If you do it, I'll get someone to send you the information later. Yes. Hu Jingyao picked up the wine and poured it for Li Junxing and himself. Thank you, brother. The bidding and everything are internal. The mayor of City A has some relationship with me. He has a good relationship with your uncle. You can operate it. This project is in the bag. Hu Jingyao raised his glass and clinked glasses with Li Junxing. Thank you. You're welcome. The two of them drank enough. Hu Jingyao looked at the time and was about to leave. This time, it was Li Junxing's turn to object. Jingyao, you're not being kind. Li Junxing asked someone to serve a few more bottles of wine. Let's not talk about the fact that it's rare for me to come back and you're leaving. You've got the news too. You're going to leave just like that? His voice rose a notch when he said the last sentence. Tang Mohan, Cheng Xianyun, and the others immediately cheered and booed. Brother Li, Su Changlong complained with a look of disdain, you don't know Jingyao. Ever since he got married, he's never spent the night outside. Every time he gets together, he doesn't sit for long and has to leave. He says he wants to go back to accompany his wife. Don't you think that's too much? Too much. That's quite too much. Isn't he clearly bullying us single dogs who don't have wives? Tell me, can you bear it? No. This time, everyone answered together. Hu Jingyao drank a lot today. Hearing this, he was very helpless. What do you want? Simple. Wan Xianying had a smirk on his face. He clapped his hands and pushed the 2 bottles of XO and red wine in the middle of the table in front of Hu Jingyao. Settle these. I'll let you go. Otherwise you'll stay until the end. Are you crazy? If he drank these 4 bottles, he would have to lie here today. Jingyao, if you're a coward, don't leave today. Don't even think about leaving today. His words were filled with provocation, and his gaze was filled with disdain. Li Junxing watched them play with a faint smile on his face. In the past there was still Hu Jingyao in Lin City. He told him to meet up when he had nothing to do. Ever since Hu Jingyao returned to Rong City, he was bored there alone. It was rare for him to come back and cause trouble with these people. Hu Jingyao had already gone to get the car keys, but they forced him to sit down again. However, he didn't forget to send a message to Yang Wenchang, asking him to pick him up later. When Hu Jingyao returned home, it was already midnight. Su Qingsang was in a daze when she heard the door open. She quickly got up, put on a coat and went outside. She took a few glances and saw that the living room was brightly lit. Hu Jingyao was carried into the door by Yang Wenchang and another person she didn't know. Before she got close, she smelled alcohol. Su Qingsang felt uncomfortable. Why is he so drunk? I don't know. Yang Wenchang really didn't know. When he went to pick him up, Hu Jingyao was already almost drunk. Assistant Yang, do me a favor and send him inside. Yang Wenchang helped put Hu Jingyao on the bed. Su Qingsang smelled the strong smell of alcohol and felt even more uncomfortable. However, Yang Wenchang was still there, so she forced herself not to lose her temper. Assistant Yang, you've worked hard. You can go back first. I'm here. Okay. Mrs. Hui, you've worked hard. Let's not go yet. Alright, thank you. After sending them off, Su Qingsang closed the door and returned to her room. Hu Jingyao was dead drunk. The man, who had been sleeping soundly just a moment ago, felt uncomfortable because of the smell of alcohol. He stepped forward and looked at Hu Jingyao, resisting the urge to punch him. What was this guy doing? Why did he get so drunk without her? Jingyao? Hu Jingyao? She called him a few times but he didn't respond at all. Helplessly, she stepped forward and took off his shoes. When she was about to take off his clothes, Hu Jingyao suddenly opened his eyes. He was so drunk that he didn't know where he was and couldn't even see who was in front of him. Drink. Who said I can't drink? Bring the wine. I'll show you. Drink, drink, drink. I'll just drink you to death. Su Qingsang rarely lost her temper. She slapped Hu Jinyao's hand away with a look of displeasure on her face. The voice was very familiar. Hu Jinyao widened his eyes and looked at the person in front of him. Qingsang? Old woman. Wife. He reached out and hugged Su Qingsang's waist. Su Qingsang fell on Hu Jinyao's body. As soon as she got close, she smelled the smell of alcohol on his body that almost made her faint. It was even more uncomfortable than before. Hu Jinyao, let go of me. She wanted to vomit. Wife, come give me a kiss. Hu Jinyao was drunk. He raised his head and was about to move closer. The smell of alcohol was even stronger now. Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore. A wave of nausea welled up in her. Without thinking, she pushed Hu Jinyao away and ran to the bathroom to vomit. Before she had time to rinse her mouth, Hu Jinyao followed her in. He staggered. When he saw the sink, his body leaned forward and he vomited as well. The pungent smell came again. Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore and vomited again. It was as if the two of them were competing to see who vomited more. After Hu Jinyao finished vomiting, he looked at Su Qingsang, who was still vomiting, and laughed. Wife, are you also drunk? As he spoke, he tried his best to glare in Su Qingsang's direction. Wife, you don't drink, don't you? Drink your ass. His drunken words made Su Qingsang very angry. When she finally recovered, she saw Hu Jinyao's body slip and he sat on the ground. His heart was filled with anger. Hu Jinyao, get up. She wanted to pull him up, but the man's body was full of the smell of alcohol. Not only was there the smell of alcohol, but there was also the filth he had vomited. Su Qingsang was furious. After being married to Hu Jinyao for more than a year, it wasn't that he hadn't drunk before, but he had never been as drunk as he was now. She couldn't pull him up, and the smell of alcohol on his body made her feel even more uncomfortable. She was so angry that she didn't want to care about this guy anymore. She glared at Hu Jinyao, who was sober for a long time. In the end, she couldn't bear to go forward and help him up. As soon as Su Qingsang approached Hu Jinyao, she actually wanted to vomit again. The smell on this man was too unpleasant. She wanted to vomit just by smelling it. She resisted the urge to vomit and half-dragged, half-pushed, half-pulled and half-coaxed Hu Jinyao into the bathtub. She turned on the water and began to turn on the water without testing the temperature. If he was cold, so be it. Let him die of cold. Let's see if he dares to be so drunk next time. Although she thought that, her heart softened in the end. As she took off Hu Jinyao's clothes, she tested the temperature of the water. Hu Jinyao was also cooperative. He raised his hands and feet when he was told to. Su Qingsang spent a long time and finally washed Hu Jinyao clean. She brought him a bath towel and asked him to get up, but the guy didn't move as if he was asleep. Su Qingsang was so angry that she almost laughed. She turned off the water first and ignored this person. She tidied up the bathroom. After cleaning up, she turned back to look at Huo Jinyao. Huo Jinyao, if you want to sleep in this bathtub, I'm leaving. If you want to go back to bed, then get up. There was no response, so Su Qingsang had to pull him again. Fortunately, this time he was more cooperative. She casually wiped his body dry and wrapped him in the bath towel. After Su Qingsang was done, she was so tired that she was about to collapse. She didn't care that her body was still wet. She casually took off her clothes and fell asleep. Su Qingsang was almost late when she went to the hospital. She was so sleepy that she couldn't get up after being tormented by Huo Jinyao for most of the night. When she finally got up, she realized that she was going to be late. She didn't even have time to eat breakfast. She rushed to the department and saw that Director Sun Huiya was already there. She had an outpatient clinic today and a meeting in the department later. After the outpatient clinic, Su Qingsang only heard about something when she was at the meeting. Sun Huiya had already reached the age of retirement. Although the hospital would hire her again if she retired, the director of the obstetrics and gynecology department might be the deputy director, Shin Lingyun. It might also be the deputy director, Yang Lu. During dinner, Lance pulled Su Qingsang aside and started gossiping. Tell me, now that Director Sun has retired, will it be Deputy Director Shin or Deputy Director Yang who will take over? Su Qingsang looked at her gossipy face and couldn't help but laugh. No matter who goes up, it won't be us. That's not necessarily true. Ling Fei moved closer and whispered, have you ever thought about it? No matter who was promoted, the position of Deputy Chief Physician would be vacant. Wouldn't everyone have a chance then? Su Qingsang paused for a moment, then quickly shook her head. I don't want to think about it. After all, my seniority is not enough. I don't have enough seniority, but I have the ability to make up for it. Ling Fei blinked. Did you forget about your surgery last month? It was so difficult, but you still managed to overcome it. In my opinion, although you don't have enough seniority, you can still fight for it. Su Qingsang smiled and looked at Ling Fei. You can do it too. Do you want to give it a try? I really want to fight for it. Ling Fei didn't conceal her ambition in the slightest, but I admit that I'm not as good as you in terms of talent. These are the words of Director Sunday. Ling Fei had a good relationship with Su Qingsang, so she made a serious suggestion. Qingsang, I'm serious. You've been in this hospital for more than half a year now. You really don't have enough seniority. But even if you don't have enough seniority this year, it doesn't mean next year. Your professional skills are there. I think you can fight for it. Get the position of Deputy Chief Physician in at least 3 years. It's not impossible. Su Qingsang had picked up a piece of fish to eat, but the fishy smell made her a little uncomfortable. She put down her chopsticks. I don't dare to think about 3 years. 5 years. I'll give myself a deadline of 5 years. I knew it. Ling Fei smiled and blinked at Su Qingsang. Good luck. I have high hopes for you. Su Qingsang put aside the feeling of wanting to vomit because of her words. She began to think seriously. Perhaps 3 years was not impossible. She didn't have enough seniority, but she could improve her professional skills. It wasn't impossible. Su Qingsang took this matter to heart. She was still very grateful for Ling Fei's encouragement. Thank you for your kind words. With that in mind, Su Qingsang forgot about the fact that she was not feeling well. After becoming a doctor, from assistant doctor to attending physician, to deputy chief physician to chief physician, step by step, Su Qingsang didn't have much ambition, but this kind of promotion process represented an affirmation of her ability. It was worth a gamble. Huo Jinyao went home early that day and found Su Qingsang in the study. Auntie Yu was cooking in the kitchen. Su Qingsang didn't run to the kitchen to see if there was anything she needed help like before. When he woke up this morning, he realized that he seemed to have gone overboard yesterday. He drank too much and was really drunk. He had a rough impression of what happened after that. Before he got drunk, he asked Yang Wenchang to send him home. What happened after that was only a shadow. He knocked on the door of the study, but there was no response. He gently pushed the door open. Su Qingsang was sitting behind the desk. In addition to the notebook in front of her, there was a pile of documents and books beside her. What? He took a few steps forward and called again, but found that Su Qingsang didn't respond. Was she angry? Huo Jinyao continued to walk forward. Su Qingsang didn't notice him at all. She stared at the documents in front of her and said softly, the early stage of cervical cancer and, wife? Was she really going to ignore him? Was she angry? Su Qingsang looked at the two papers in her hand. Some of them were consistent while others were not. Wife. A pair of big hands suddenly appeared on her waist. Su Qingsang was shocked. She turned around and glared at Hu Jinyao. What are you doing? Wife. Don't be angry. Hu Jinyao took the initiative to admit his mistake. It was my fault yesterday. I shouldn't have been so drunk. Let go of me. She had just thought of a key point and was about to write it down. She went to pull his hand, but Hu Jinyao tightened his grip. Wife. Don't be angry. I promise there won't be a next time. Hu Jinyao's hands were on her waist, and now he was tightening again. Su Qingsang felt a little uncomfortable in her stomach. Hu Jinyao let go. Did he know that he had interrupted her train of thought? No. Hu Jinyao was thick-skinned enough. He didn't forget how drunk he was yesterday. Wife, don't be angry. He tightened his arms and Su Qingsang felt even more uncomfortable. The feeling of nausea came one after another. She couldn't help but push Hu Jinyao away and quickly headed for the bathroom. Hu Jinyao stood there, completely stunned. What was going on? Why was she so angry? He chased Su Qingsang into the bathroom. She hadn't had dinner yet, so she couldn't vomit anything. What? Was it necessary? Was she so angry that she wanted to vomit whenever he was near her? Su Qingsang really felt uncomfortable. The feeling of vomiting made her very uncomfortable, but she couldn't vomit anything. When he finally calmed down, he patted his chest. Hu Jinyao moved closer again. As soon as he raised his hand, Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore. Don't come over. If he hadn't strangled her just now, she wouldn't have felt like vomiting. What? It was the first time Hu Jinyao saw Su Qingsang look at him with such an ugly expression. I really know I was wrong. Don't be angry. As he spoke, his hands circled her waist again. Afraid that she would ignore him, he was very nervous. Speaking of which, you can't blame me yesterday. It's all that kid Li Juanxing's fault. He's too bad. He was the one who urged the others to force me to drink. I'm telling you, next time he does this, I'll beat him up. Before Su Qingsang could respond, his hand strangled her, and her stomach began to feel uncomfortable again. She pushed Hu Jinyao away and went to vomit again. This reaction was a big blow to Hu Jinyao. He looked at Su Qingsang with a sad face. Wife, you don't have to do this, do you? Didn't he just drink a little? Why did he have such a big reaction when it came to Su Qingsang? If he remembered correctly, she seemed to have vomited when she smelled the alcohol on him yesterday. Su Qingsang didn't have time to pay attention to him. The nausea had just been suppressed with great difficulty, but now it was even more uncomfortable. She lay there and felt that she was about to vomit. Her face was pale and in pain. Wife, shut up. She was already uncomfortable, and hearing it made her even more annoyed. Hu Jinyao, who had never been treated so coldly, immediately became listless. This time, Su Qingsang felt uncomfortable for a long time. It wasn't until 10 minutes later that she finally felt better. After rinsing her mouth, she stood up. Seeing Hu Jinyao behind her, she felt extremely annoyed. This was the first time she felt this way. Can you stay away from me? Wife. I feel like vomiting whenever you get close to me. Su Qingsang had vomited 2 or 3 times. She really didn't want to suffer anymore. Hu Jinyao looked at her and took a step forward. Su Qingsang quickly raised her hand. Don't come over. She finally didn't want to vomit. Su Qingsang patted her chest and heard Auntie Yu calling for food. Wash your hands and eat. After saying this, she walked past him to the dining room. When she walked past him, she deliberately turned her body sideways. Wife? Hu Jinyao was hurt by Su Qingsang's actions. Now he hated Li Juanxing and the others. After the hatred, he felt wronged. He only got drunk once. Did it have to be so exaggerated? He had taken a shower yesterday, and there was no smell of alcohol on him today, okay? Su Qingsang went to the dining room. Auntie Yu had already brought the dishes to the table and was very considerate to serve them a bowl of soup. Hu Jinyao sat down next to Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang, who was about to drink the soup, suddenly couldn't sit still when she smelled the chicken soup. She stood up abruptly and rushed to the bathroom again. This time, the grievance on Hu Jinyao's face couldn't be tolerated. He subconsciously smelled the smell on his body. It didn't stink? It didn't smell like alcohol either? Why did Su Qingsang treat him like this? Did she do it on purpose? Just because he got drunk once? Why did he feel even more wrong than Dou Yi? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.